Chapter 1089. Could you please go faster? Lightning flew beside the cab, wishing she could go up and push the train. However, she also knew that even if Maggie were to push the mountain-sized train, it would be useless. How about adding more coal to the furnace? Asked Roland. Hey, little girl, the furnace will explode if the pressure is too high. The pilot of the Black River was a gray-haired old man who looked more like a friendly neighbor than a soldier. Don't worry. The First Army won't be defeated so easily, even if the enemy is a demon from hell. Lightning pursed her lips and did not reply, although she knew it was beyond her expectation that the train could run at such a high speed. She was still very anxious. It did not take them much effort to find the Black River by following the railway. After all, it was hard to miss such a large and eye-catching machine. Apart from startling the people on the train when they approached, the rest of the journey went smoothly. As a member of the Witch Union, the conductor soon believed her and ordered the train to turn around. However, Lightning could not relax at all. When the train turned to Tower Station number 1, she finally got in touch with Sylvie. Sylvie's news made her heart sink. Not only had the demons seized the opportunity when the First Army was advancing and launched a surprise attack, but they were also rapidly approaching the camp from 2 directions. Without the support of the cannons, it would be even more difficult for the First Army to exert its full strength, which would undoubtedly make the situation even worse. After hearing the news, she could not be as confident as the old man. The only good news was that Maggie had successfully found the injured Lorger. With Nana's help, the wolf girl's life was finally in danger. It's noisy and windy outside. Do you want to come in and sit down? It's not easy to shout every word. The old man took a puff of his pipe and leaned against the window. It may be a little bumpy inside, but at least it's warm. This furnace is much better than a fireplace. No. Thank you. Lightning looked at the trembling bridge and shook her head. I think it's okay. Sure enough, this was the Black River's limit. If the train continued to shake at this frequency, even if the boiler could survive, the train would fall apart. I can see that you're still worried about the situation over there. Are there any relatives or friends in the camp? Yes, Lightning replied worriedly. So have I, he said, stroking his beard. And 2 of them. Huh. Lightning couldn't help but be slightly stunned. She originally thought that the other party was calm, because he had nothing to worry about. I used to be a miner. I had 4 children in my life. Except for the eldest who died of a cold, the others all lived until His Majesty Wimbledon came. The old man smiled and said, They used to live like mice, small and weak, but after joining the army, they seem to have changed. This is also the reason why I am so confident in the First Army. A team composed of such people will not be easily defeated. Is that the case? Lightning couldn't help but ask, What about the other one? He's on this train. He tapped his pipe and said, He was the first lookout who saw you approaching. The old man paused for a moment and said proudly, Because His Majesty Wimbledon brought all these changes, I wanted to do something for him. Besides, it's boring to stay in the mine alone, so I decided to take a walk. His Majesty chose a train team from those who were familiar with the operation of the steam engine, so I signed up. I didn't expect to be chosen. So the old man was not like what she had imagined. Lightning pursed her lips and was about to say something when the telephone on the bridge suddenly rang. Father, I see Tower Station number 1. It looks like there's a battle over there. I can see flashes and flames. The old man's excited voice could even be heard by Lightning. How many times have I told you? This is the army. Don't call me father. The old man yelled into the phone. Just keep watching. I'm going to sound the whistle to tell them that reinforcements are coming. Then he twitched his beard at Lightning and said, See? I told you they wouldn't be defeated so easily, right? Then he turned around, pulled the rope on his back, and shouted in a loud voice, Go boys! Woo! Half a quarter of an hour later, the Black River charged into the center of the melee, accompanied by a deafening roar of the steam horn and a loud deceleration. The stone needles that were stuck in the rails were all smashed into pieces. The collision of black stone and steel produced a series of dazzling sparks in the pitch-black front of the train. Perhaps the deceleration of the train had given the enemies the illusion that they could stop the steel behemoth. Several demons approached the rails and tried to stop the steel behemoth, but they were all caught by the wheels and crushed to a pulp. No matter how slow the train was, it was not something that could be stopped by any living creature. At the same time, the machine gun turrets on the front and back of the armored train began to fire in all directions. The demons who had invaded the encampment were immediately attacked from both sides. They had no chance to hide and were shot down one by one. The bone spears and other weapons were no more than scratches to the Black River. At this moment, lightning had flown into the turret compartment. "Sylvie, what's the target?" "It's right in front of you, about 3,300 meters away," Sylvie said, noticing the arrival of the train. She immediately reported the location of the bombardment. "It's wide open. There's no cover." The moment the train came to a complete stop, the gunners immediately got to work. In Sylvie's vision, the main force of the enemy was now within the firing range of the encampment's defensive line. There were only about 5,000 of them, not as many as during the battle at the northbound slope. However, they were very scattered, like bandits without any restraints. It was also because of this that the entire plain seemed to be filled with their troops. It was a terrifying sight to behold. Further away, the magic eye's detection was distorted. The ground was covered by an opaque black veil. Even the magic eye, which could see through any blind spots, could not see what was behind the veil. It did not seem to be the interference caused by the Godstone of retaliation. The anti-magic domain gave people the feeling of a silent, dead land. If there was, then there was. If there wasn't, then there wasn't. It was more like something else. Something alive. But before she fell asleep, there was nothing there. The long needles and stone pillars that attacked the encampment came from the Black Veil. This was the most depressing battle that Sylvie had ever experienced. From the ambush to the surprise attack, her vision was restricted, and the demon's every move seemed to be aimed at her. She had no time to think about how the enemy had gotten so close to the encampment. Instead, she focused all her attention on the Black River. Since she could not see the exact position of the target, she could only make adjustments according to the results of the bombardment. Finally, the Black River let out its first roar. The scorching flames lit up the long body of the ship and the encampment in the dark. Faster than the sound, the cannonballs arrived. Chapter 1090. At the same time, the army of demons charged to both sides of the battlefield. Their sprinting speed was extremely fast, and it took them less than 2 minutes to close in from 1,500 meters to within a kilometer. If it was daytime, this would be a distance that could be seen with the naked eye. Although Sylvie had informed the liaison officer of the enemy's movements, the First Army's firepower did not immediately suppress the enemy's momentum due to the darkness of the night. What was more surprising was that when the bullets landed near the enemy, the demons would crouch down and move forward on the ground instead. With their strong limbs, they were able to crawl quickly. Coupled with the scattered formation, the killing power of the machine guns was significantly reduced. In Sylvie's memory, once the target entered the machine gun squad's shooting range, it was as if they had hit an invisible wall. Wherever the firepower reached, the enemy would fall in droves like harvested wheat, and they would pay a heavy price in a very short time. This was fully proven by the unification of Grey Castle and the defeat of the Church. However, most of the bullets flew over the heads of the demons that were lying low. Even if they landed on the demons' heads, they could not cause much damage. Although she had warned the front line, the defending soldiers did not make any effective changes because they could not see the shooting results. To Sylvie's relief, the counterattack on the other side had achieved a good result. The darkness created by the enemy in the distance could only block the magic eyes, but could not block the cannonballs. For the Longsong cannons, the distance of more than 3,000 meters was covered in the blink of an eye, and the burst of fire even vaguely illuminated the pitch-black land. When the first sand column rushed out of the darkness, it was accompanied by demon limbs and black stone fragments. Considering the size of the blind area and the frequency of the enemy's projectiles, the spider demons in the darkness should be arranged in a column, so that they could pack as many aberrations as possible in a small area. Advance 20 meters in succession and shoot continuously. Sylvie shouted at the sigil of listening. Got it. No matter what, the most important thing was to destroy the enemy's long-range attack first. As long as the defensive line was still there, the demons could not easily cross over. The closer the distance, the less disadvantageous it would be to fight at night. Moreover, the First Army had many backup plans and did not completely rely on the machine guns. If the troops collapsed, there would be no way to save the situation. At the front line, Fishball prayed that the stone needles would not fall on his head as he gritted his teeth and got into the shooting position. In fact, he was very surprised that he dared to run out of the trench. In the past, he would have wet his pants and begged the commander to spare his life. Perhaps it was the words, "You are not a coward," that gave him courage. Or perhaps it was the sound of gunfire behind him that gave him courage. He finally controlled his legs and did not become the first officer to be killed for desertion. Although he was just a small platoon leader, he was still a serious leader. But Fishball knew that he would not have agreed to carry out such a high-risk mission under normal circumstances. No matter how high the reward was, he would be. It could only be said that the army was an incredible place. As long as one person took the lead and charged out of the trench amidst the roar of guns and cannons, the rest would follow involuntarily. Under the influence of this atmosphere, Fishball felt as if his brain had stopped thinking and his body had become a machine. "Class leader, the ammo chain is ready," his subordinate shouted. Fishball took a deep breath and lowered the muzzle of the Mark I. Although it was an anti-aircraft squad, the rifle was equipped with a horizontal ruler and a simple sight, so it could be switched to shooting at ground targets at any time. At the same time, the baffles on both sides of the machine gun were mainly used to defend against spears thrown from the air. Once the machine gun was completely flat, it meant that the back of the machine gun would lose its protection. The only thing he could do was to keep his head as close to the plank as possible and pray. After all, as long as he didn't die on the spot, he would have the opportunity to receive treatment from Miss Nana. The prerequisite was that the medical team's rescue was fast enough. As if he wanted to vent his fear, Fishball roared and pulled the trigger, unleashing a hail of bullets into the dark night. Explosions rang out from time to time. He could no longer tell whether they were from the long-song cannons or the spider demons. Occasionally, some of the black stone needles would fall nearby, or even hit the baffle. The stimulation of several brushes with death made him numb, and he could not think of anything else other than shooting. "We're done. Reload." Coming. Where's the new ammo chain?" "Here." Just as he was barely able to see the enemy's figure, the gun bolt clicked, and the third box of bullets was emptied. "Bring me another box of ammo." "Didn't you hear me?" "Where are they?" Fishball turned around abruptly, only to find that the other two members of his squad had fallen to the ground, with half of the bloody stone needles stuck in their bodies. He was stunned for a moment, and then he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Medical team! Someone's hurt! We need treatment!" In response to him was a series of continuous booms. At this moment, the mortars finally joined the counterattack. More than 100 shells soared into the air and rained down like hailstones within 400 to 800 meters, almost cutting the demon army in half. At that moment, it was as if countless flowers of fire had bloomed on the ground. The dazzling light not only illuminated the enemies, but also the bloodstains on the baffles of the machine guns. The turning point that Sylvie had been waiting for finally came. Although the bombardment from the Black River had weakened the spider demon's attack, the enemy did not give up. Every few minutes, several stone pillars would be hurled at the First Army. Now that the First Army was engaged in battle, each stone pillar could cause a lot of casualties. Even though Agatha, Shavi, and Molly were doing their best to assist the army in defending, it was impossible for them to guard the entire defensive line, which was hundreds of meters long, on both flanks. The only thing she could do was to tell the front line where they needed help during the bombardment. Until Maggie's voice came from the sigil of listening. "This is the artillery position, Ku. The Tequila Witches have killed all the invading demons, Ku. Commander Van said that they will be ready to fire soon. He hopes that you can guide them, Ku." Sylvie could not help but clench her fists. "Of course. Just stay there and don't move. I'll use the sigil to communicate faster than a phone call." Maggie got it, Ku. When the 4 long-song cannons on the artillery position joined the counterattack, the demons' attack suddenly came to a halt. After only 2 rounds of firing, the demons reacted as if they had been prepared. Chapter 1091. When Anna walked into the temporary underground headquarters, the atmosphere in the room was quite heavy. Seeing her arrival, everyone stood up and bowed to her. "Greetings, Your Highness." Iron Axe even knelt on one knee and said, "I'm sorry to have frightened you. I failed to see through the enemy's tricks and was caught off guard by the demons. I'm very sorry for my negligence." "You don't have to be like this." Anna waved her hand and said, "Just treat me as an ordinary person who cares about the war. I'm just here to ask about the situation. This attack. Is everyone okay?" Although she had become the queen, she was still not used to such an occasion, especially when Vendi and Agatha also bowed to her. Although she had never mentioned it in the past and rarely expressed her thoughts in front of the witches, she actually liked the feeling of calling each other sisters in the union. And this attack on the camp was the same. Compared to being surrounded by the gods' punishment witches and guards and being sent to the underground bunker at the beginning of the battle, she preferred to fight together with everyone, just like in the previous months of demons. However, Anna knew that since she had accepted this identity, some things could only be kept to the bottom of her heart. She only hoped that her appearance could make everyone feel at ease. Iron Axe hesitated, which was rare for him. "Your Highness, the situation is not very good. Can you tell me about it?" "Of course, we happen to be discussing this issue." He looked at Philinshilt, who nodded and opened the notebook in his hand. According to the current statistics from the medical team, the First Army suffered more than 200 casualties and nearly 700 wounded in the night attack. The Light of Dawn said in a low voice. "However, due to the limited time, this is only the most rough statistics. The actual number of casualties will definitely rise further. After all, Miss Nana can't take care of so many wounded. More than 200 casualties. This was a loss second only to the Battle of the Church. And that was a decisive battle that would determine the fate of both sides. This was only the first battle after the Northern Expedition. And the First Army was still a long way from the Tequila ruins. It was no wonder that Iron Axe had a difficult look on his face. Anna had seen the scene in the wounded barracks. Soldiers covered in blood lay in a row on the ground. The air was filled with the thick smell of blood and endless moans of pain. With Nana's magic, it was impossible for her to cure all the wounded in one go. For those with broken limbs or ruptured internal organs, she could only cure 5 or 6 of them in one day. Therefore, if he wanted to save more people, he had to save his magic power and use it in the most critical areas. For example, for patients who had their lungs pierced or their intestines cut, they would only heal the fatal wounds on their organs. If the problem was not so serious, the medical team would be responsible for suturing the epidermis after drinking purified water. If the problem was serious, the wound would be left open and further treatment would be done the next day. During this period of time, they relied on the sleeping fern and Donghua's potion to help the seriously injured endure the pain. As for whether everyone could survive until the next day, or whether the potion could cause addiction similar to the Dreamland water, it was no longer a problem for the medical team to worry about. In such an oppressive environment, it was not an easy task to precisely distribute magic power to the parts that needed treatment. It was hard to imagine that the little girl who used to read and write with her, who would feel dizzy at the sight of blood, had now grown to such an extent. "I'll talk to His Majesty and try to persuade Madame Spear of Fallen Dragon Ridge to help the front line," Anna replied slowly. "With her, the medical team can save more people. By the way, how did the demons get close to the camp without making a sound?" "I think the demons must have taken advantage of the blind spots of the magic eye." Sylvie looked a little depressed. "I'm afraid they sent the devil beasts to test my detection range, but I didn't realize it at all." "We should have thought of it first," Agatha said, blaming herself. After the battle at the northbound slope, the demons noticed Sylvie's existence. The devil beasts were able to determine the approximate distance of the Eye of Magic through our vigilance. After that, the demons gathered at the farthest edge and launched a sneak attack on us at night. They chose the moment when Tower Station Number 1 had just fallen, which was also the moment when the defense of the camp was at its weakest. "That's true, but it's not anyone's fault. The light of dawn comforted her. If you want to deceive the demons, you have to deliberately turn a blind eye to the approaching devil beasts. But this is contrary to our usual training. Even if we knew the demons were going to do this, it would still be difficult for thousands of soldiers and ordinary workers to disguise themselves flawlessly. In other words, the demons would have discovered this distance sooner or later. Even if they didn't set up an ambush at Tower Station number 1, they would have waited for us at Tower Station number 2 and Tower Station number 3. If I remember correctly, the spider demon's shooting range should be about 2 to 3 kilometers. Additionally, it crawls very slowly. It took a long time for it to enter Sylvie's shooting range. Is it because of her good luck that she didn't discover it? Anna was puzzled. I don't know much about military operations. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. The First Army has its own detection methods, right? For example, the hydrogen balloons that often rise in the camp. You're very observant, Your Highness, Ironax said while placing his hand on his chest. To put it simply, the First Army's wartime intelligence sources are divided into 3 levels. Besides Sylvie, Lightning, and Miss Maggie, the last level is the Army itself. However, when facing demons, this level can only be used as a backup and emergency measure. After listening to the Commander-in-Chief's explanation, Anna finally had a basic understanding of the First Army's intelligence system. During the battle to unify the Kingdom of Greycastle, this system did not make any mistakes. However, when the enemies were demons, an insurmountable gap appeared in front of the First Army. That was, no matter if it was 2-legged or 4-legged, no one could outrun a devil beast with wings. This meant that once the devil beasts crossed a certain distance, the scouts would not be able to return. They could not even survive, let alone send back any information. The devil beasts, which could hide in the clouds and wait for an opportunity, had an absolute advantage. Coupled with the flat terrain of the fertile plains, they were like eagles hunting chicks. As a result, the third level's intelligence circle was greatly reduced. Even Sylvie could not assist them. The flying demons could enter the magic eye's detection range at any time and hunt down the soldiers in the outer circle, while the First Army had no ability to rescue them. A word involuntarily appeared in Anna's mind. It was a word that Roland often mentioned with a complicated expression. Air supremacy. Only the side with air supremacy could truly take the initiative in the war. In addition, he would also say some ambiguous words, such as the Black Ribbon, Autumn Mountain, and so on. Anna shook her head and suppressed these distracting thoughts. According to this explanation, the spider demons should have entered the third level's alert range at that time. Was it because it was night? Poor visibility at night is only one of the reasons, Your Highness, answered Philinshilt. According to the analysis of the General Staff, those deformed monsters might have been waiting for us from the beginning. Anna blinked in surprise. You mean they were buried in the ground in front of us? Yes, that's the only explanation for why those huge monsters appeared within our shooting range without a sound. Philin said solemnly. I've asked Miss Sylvie. She said that scanning through obstacles would consume a lot of magic power, and the range would be greatly reduced. Now that I think about it, those devil beasts were not only testing us, but also attracting Miss Sylvie's attention. As long as she kept watching the sky, she wouldn't have the magic power to pay attention to the changes underground. That's why the demons could accurately attack every corner of the campsite at night? If it was a stationary battle, it would be much easier. The black curtain that Sylvie saw was not to conceal their position, but to conceal the moment when the spider demons crawled out of the ground. Not only did the demons react quickly to the First Army's combat methods and intentions, but they were also extremely proficient in using magic power. It was indeed very difficult to fight against such an opponent. No wonder the atmosphere in the headquarters was so heavy. This was not a good sign. If Roland were here, what would he do? Just as Anna was about to say a few words of encouragement, Edith suddenly giggled. Chapter 1092. Lady Edith. Philin reminded her in a low voice. That's a loss of more than 200 people. A great victory. Just more than 200 people, the Pearl of the Northern region interrupted. What about the demons? There were about 50 of them in the camp, including one senior demon. Almost all the casualties of the First Army were caused by them. At first glance, it looks like 50 versus 200, and we've suffered a great loss. However, the enemy's main force that died in front of the defensive line is at least 2,000. And this is only the most preliminary estimate. It will take a few days to figure out the number of demons that were blown to pieces during the escape. Am I right, Miss Sylvie? Sylvie hesitated. The corpses of the enemies seen by the Eye of Magic are about the same. Lady Agatha, I'm guessing that you've never commanded a war or even participated in a war 400 years ago, right? Edith looked at the Ice Witch. The latter could not help frowning. During the Battle of Divine Will, fighting demons was a compulsory course for the witches of the Union. Although I used to be a researcher of the Quest Society and fought with the enemies on the way to explore the ruins. I'm talking about war. Edith leaned forward slightly, her expression aggressive. Edith. Iron Axe stopped her. Why? Anna suddenly asked. Her intervention drew everyone's attention back. Why do you think so? As far as I know, you were the captain of the Knight in the northern region, and you haven't experienced a war. If someone else had asked this question, it would have been like adding fuel to the fire. However, when it came from Anna, everyone felt that it was surprisingly peaceful, and did not seem to be arguing with her. It was probably because of her pure and serious eyes that they could not have any other thoughts. Edith also restrained her momentum, and replied with a hand on her chest. You're right. I haven't experienced a real war, but someone here has. She paused for a moment. Looking at her expression, I can tell what the result is. Her? Everyone followed the Pearl of the Northern region's gaze and saw Phyllis, the representative of Tequila, holding a cup of hot tea at the corner of the long table. The corners of her mouth were raised, and her eyes were full of smiles. Every once in a while he would pick up the teacup and take a sip, as if he was tasting some delicious drink. For the Tequila witches, this was not a common sight. Having lost their sense of taste, they only ate for the sake of survival. It was almost impossible for them to show an expression of enjoyment. Only then did everyone notice that Phyllis was not paying attention to the meeting at all. Even though she was the center of attention now, she was still daydreaming. It was not until Vendi gently pushed her that she came back to her senses. Oh, what were you talking about? The god's punishment witch coughed twice and said, I was thinking about something very important, and didn't pay attention to what you said. Does your highness have any questions for me? Everyone was speechless. It was obvious that Edith was in a daze, but she could calmly say that she was thinking about something important in front of everyone. It turned out that the ancient witches 400 years ago were not so different from modern people in some aspects. No one knew who laughed first, but the crowd burst into laughter one after another. The heavy atmosphere in the room suddenly lightened a lot. It seems that I don't need to ask anymore, Anna said and shook her head with a smile. Edith stood up and looked around. The demons suffered a greater loss. They turned around and ran away. But we're still standing here, and Tower Station number 1 is safe and sound. How can we talk about failure? His Majesty once told me that victory and defeat are measured by whether they achieved their goals or not. Obviously, they didn't achieve the desired result. I can even say that the commander of the demons made a very serious mistake. Mistake? Everyone was a little surprised. This night attack had been planned carefully. It could be said that it was a very successful ambush, and did not seem to have made a big mistake. Not only were they able to accurately judge magic power, but the fact that they were able to so quickly and effectively counter the magic power of their magic power was shocking to me. The two tribes had never communicated with each other. The only time they had fought was during the Battle of Northbound Slope. Although no one mentioned it, everyone was a little afraid of the demons. The demons were different from the enemies in their minds. Even though the humans on the fertile plains had suffered a crushing defeat, and the Witch Empire had been destroyed by the demons, that was, after all, old history. History was something that would distort and fade with the passage of time. It was not something that could be directly felt by people. It was not until the outbreak of this battle that people really touched a corner of history hidden under the veil. They were not comparable to the demonic beasts that ran rampant in the barbarian land. Apart from magic power and strong bodies, They were also a highly intelligent civilization. Even human beings were not as good as them. When excuses such as "we only rely on the power and magic given by God," if not for these, how could human beings be afraid of these barbarians, were torn apart, and when the brains that human beings were proud of were overshadowed, the impact was absolutely indescribable. What followed was self-doubt. So few people thought about the demons. Therefore, hearing Edith's words, everyone could not help but feel a sense of curiosity. What did they do wrong? Anna asked subconsciously. They were too arrogant, Your Highness, Edith replied firmly. Creating chaos, seizing the artillery positions, and then using the army to kill. If this was a group of knights or an ancient army, it would have collapsed a long time ago. But the first army was not like that. They only saw the changes in the weapons, but ignored the differences in the people. This was the biggest mistake made by the enemies. Everyone was suddenly shocked. From the beginning to the end, they only sent in about 50 demons, which meant that the new attack methods were not easy to implement. They should have tried to put them together to maximize their power. But how did they do it? They scattered the 50 demons into 4 areas. The barracks, the 2 trenches, and the artillery positions. The Pearl of the Northern Region said with fervor. The Pearl of the Northern Region said, "The demon commander is not a fool, so the reason why it gave the order is obvious. As long as a dozen demons are put in, the humans and the insects will be utterly defeated. Isn't it arrogant to show such blatant contempt?" Anna vaguely understood what the Pearl of the Northern Region meant. She could not help but clench her fists. If they didn't make this mistake, if they treated human beings as equal opponents, then they wouldn't have relied on these 50 demons to capture the barracks, but to eliminate as many enemies as possible. Edith nodded affirmatively. Suppose the enemy sent all the demons, including a senior demon, into the barracks, and the army did not move, while the spider demons sneaked up on us and left. What would the situation be like? Anna felt a chill run down her spine. The reason why 50 demons were exchanged for 200 demons was that they had scattered their forces, and the seesaw battle to seize the positions had bought time for the reinforcements to react. If the enemies had rushed in from the beginning and treated the senior demon as a disposable weapon, the number of casualties would probably have been several times higher. Chapter 1093. Connecting to the realm of mind was a very exhausting task. If one had to describe it, it would be scorching and chaotic. The former came from the origin of magic. Although it was the source of all power, the end of all things, and the foundation of the realm of mind's existence, before the realm of mind reached that level, any action that approached it would lead to destruction. The latter came from the consciousness itself. When the magic power was awakened to a certain extent, it would leave a mark on the origin of magic. Countless consciousnesses gathered here, like seawater covering the earth. Some of them sank to the bottom and could not be traced, while some were still floating, drifting with the current. The difference between the two was whether the consciousness itself was aware of this. This was also one of the characteristics that distinguished the lower from the higher. The ones that sank were dead and worthless, while the ones that floated showed that they had been to the realm of mind. Even if they only had a glimpse, they were fundamentally different from other living beings. Hacksword was one of the best. Not only had it obtained the approval of the origin of magic, but it had also mastered the ability to connect with the realm of mind. This enabled it to actively search for valuable information. However, it was not suitable to do this often. The influence between consciousnesses was always mutual. If it stayed in the realm of mind for a long time, it would be easy to be contaminated. Moreover, moving in the realm of mind was like moving through a turbulent current. Many of its kind had entered the realm of mind and never returned, leaving behind only an empty shell. Hacksword did not want to follow in their footsteps. Apart from the above 2 reasons, the most important reason was that Hacksword did not like this place. No matter how advanced it was, floating was only temporary. After losing its main body, its consciousness would sooner or later sink into the origin of magic, and its upper body would be replaced by a newly awakened individual. This scene reminded Hacksword that it was not eternal. Before it was completely upgraded, it would also disappear. Hacksword felt like it was witnessing its own death, which made it difficult for him to immerse himself in it. Suddenly, Hacksword sensed a familiar aura. Is this Caberdabi? Hacksword was a little surprised. Why did it become so weak? It looked like it was dying. Even if those insects had killed it, it would not have ended up like this. Although it had sunk to the bottom, it was still the consciousness of an ascended being. As a brave warrior who was the commander of the Western Front Army, death would not cause its consciousness to dissipate. It should be enough for him to search for it carefully. Caberdabi, however, was far weaker than a female worm and an ascendant. Based on the amount of magic power it had, it should not be able to enter the realm of mind. Hacksword imagined himself reaching out with non-existent hands and slowly grasping this consciousness. Sky Lord. A voice woke him up from the realm of mind. The king is summoning you. It looked back at the guard. I understand. You can leave now. Yes. Hacksword let go of the inheritance fragment that was still emitting a faint red light, and flew to the top of the birth tower. Ever since they obtained part of the civilization's inheritance, their research on magic power could be said to have advanced by leaps and bounds. Especially with the appearance of the symbiotic demons, they gradually got rid of their dependence on magic stones. Even the birth tower had many abilities that did not exist before, such as amplifying the effects of magic and resonating with other birth towers. The latter, in particular, allowed the scattered great dark monarchs to communicate directly with the king. The mist at the top of the tower was the thickest. This damp feeling dispelled the discomfort of being connected to the realm of mind. Hacksword placed his hand on the tower and concentrated. Sky Lord, I am honored by your summons, my king. How's the plan going? The king's voice boomed. There isn't much time left. Has the Sky Sea realm made a move again? It asked subconsciously. That's right, and the scale is unusually large. Most of the suggestions are to avoid it first. After all, the deity of gods was about to be completed. Once it was activated, the situation of only defending and not attacking would be completely reversed. The deity of gods. Hacksword was shocked. The legendary ultimate creation, was it finally going to be realized? To be free from the restrictions of the magic stone mines and move freely in every corner of the world. This was once the goal that countless of its kind yearned for. Now it was right before their eyes. Just as the name said, it was a gift from God, and it also symbolized that they were one step closer to the origin of magic. The Sky Lord used his consciousness to express his reverence for the king. Then what's your answer? The Western Front has encountered some changes. Hacksword wanted to reply that everything was going smoothly. The king was under pressure from the Sky Sea realm, and he should not give him any more trouble. But his loyalty to the king was absolute, and it was not his place to make decisions for the king. My commander reports those humans. He paused and decided to use an official title, which was what they called themselves in the past. Compared to 400 years ago, the humans have changed greatly, especially in terms of combat methods. The vanguard suffered some losses, but it did not affect the plan. After listening to the report, the king was silent for a while. Is it the result of evolution? It has nothing to do with evolution, but rather the use of artifacts and natural elements, such as fire, which we are not familiar with. Not even magic power? Indeed. My commander originally planned to capture some humans alive and seize a few weapons, just like before, but it did not succeed. Hacksword said. He suggested that I send more troops to the Western Front, or use the realm of mind to investigate the cause. An ascendant has fallen into the hands of humans? The king said unhappily. Although I expected such a day would come after the ascension became more relaxed. Isn't it a little too soon? I remember that the commander of the Western Front is your favorite subordinate, and even has the title of Genius General. Are you sure it did not fail in its duties? Hacksword hurriedly lowered his head. What's the result? Nothing was found. Its magic power is almost non-existent, and I can't find out the details in such a state. He hesitated. But what? The moment I came into contact with consciousness, I seemed to see an unusually bright flame. It's probably an illusion. If it's really a flame, then don't bother. The king replied. Although we rarely use it, we understand it well enough. Besides, learning from humans is a thing of the past. As for the first request, I'll reject it on your behalf. The Sky-Sea Realm's attack is the main focus. I can't transfer more troops to you. And you can't transfer the existing troops out, which will result in an internal emptiness. Don't forget, the legacy shard that concerns the upgrade of the race is now in your custody. I understand. Chapter 1094. Thorntown at the foot of the Cage Mountain in the Kingdom of Dawn. A convoy of carriages slowly drove through the streets and stopped in front of the Lord's mansion. We're here. Get down here and be quick about it. The man who looked like a steward waved the horsewhip in his hand and shouted, If you want to live, you better know your place. Answer whatever the Lord asks later. Do you understand? Most of the people who got down from the carriages were dressed in rags and had pale faces. Their hands were tied together by a hemp rope like a bunch of grasshoppers. There was no doubt that they were all slaves, the lowest kind. Such a scene had recently become the norm in Thorntown. Ever since the exploration team of Grey Castle set up camp here, the town, which was usually deserted, had gradually become lively. Not only were there an endless stream of caravans, but also many emissaries sent by various lords. They either stayed or set up tents and barracks outside the town. In just over a month, the remote town seemed to have grown a lot bigger. Lord Marl, what do you think of these people? Feline Sheffield from Maplesong City was one of them. He rubbed his hands and looked at Marl Tokat, the great noble representative of the City of Glow, with a charming smile on his face. They are healthy and have no defects. I personally selected them from the prison. Don't be fooled by their thin and weak appearance. They are actually fierce people. As long as you feed them, they will definitely meet your requirements. All right. Marl waved his hand impatiently. Although Feline had the surname of the Lord of Maplesong, he knew that Feline was not someone worth talking to. It's not me who wants to buy the prisoners. It's the Lord next to me, Mr. Sean, the captain of the Imperial Guards of the King of Grey Castle. I see. Old Feline saluted again. As soon as the Lord heard the call of the King of Dawn, he immediately decided to respond and ordered me to prepare for departure as soon as possible. Please forgive me for this oversight in such a hurry. No problem. Sean walked to the front of the group of people and glanced at them one by one. Compared with the first few batches of prisoners sent by the King of Dawn, the quality of these prisoners was obviously much worse. But now that the Temple of the Cursed had entered the stage of full excavation, a large number of people were needed. Sui Xiong did not intend to make a fuss about this problem as long as it was useful. Just as he walked to the center of the group, a prisoner suddenly knelt down in front of him. Sir, I'm innocent. Please let me go. As both of his hands were tied to a long rope, he was stopped by the human wall before he could even finish his action. He could only kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. You're courting death. The steward immediately gnashed his teeth in hatred. If it weren't for the presence of the other two masters, he would have already lashed out with his whip. What injustice! Sean stopped in his tracks. I didn't kill anyone or rob anyone. I just stole and slaughtered my neighbor's chickens. The prisoner answered hurriedly. In Maplesong City, you'll only be sentenced to whipping or exile. You don't deserve to die, sir. Is that so? Sean looked at old Feline. The latter quickly said, Yes and no, Your Excellency. The day before we received the summons from the King of Dawn, the Earl of Sheffield made a small adjustment to the laws of the territory. In order to combat the increasingly rampant rats and underground crimes, all punishments have been raised by one level. Theft is no exception. What? The prisoner was stunned. You're sentenced to death for stealing and slaughtering a few chickens? What's so difficult to understand? Old Feline glanced at him contemptuously. A war has just broken out in the kingdom. In order to eliminate the rebels, Maplesong City suffered a great loss. In addition, the number of refugees has skyrocketed. How can we suppress scums like you without heavy sentences? Today you steal a neighbor's chickens. Maybe one day your neighbor will starve to death because of this. What's the difference between this and murder? In my opinion, it's just a matter of course. Your Excellency, the prisoner wanted to argue, but Sean interrupted him. Since you're not innocent, take this labor as atonement. He paused for a moment and raised his voice. I think you should already know that as long as you work for 10 years, no matter what crime you've committed, you'll be pardoned. This is the promise made by Grey Castle and the King of Dawn. Don't try to escape. This is your only chance. Old Feline smiled as he signaled his subordinates to take all the prisoners away. I knew that you would accept all of them. According to the agreement, one person is 1 gold royal, so that's a total of 106 gold royals, right? Xiaoyan replied. Yes. Old Feline's eyes lit up. Go to the Lord's mansion to get it. There will be someone there to receive you. Yes, I'll go, Old Feline said with a smile. Also, Sean suddenly said as Old Feline turned around, don't let this happen again. You mean? Old Feline was slightly surprised. I don't care if the Lord of Maplesong City changed the law the day before. According to the agreement, the traitor must tell the prisoner the purpose of the trip and the reward and punishment before departure. This kind of person doesn't realize that he's sentenced to death. Next time, I'll deduct part of the golden dragon, Sean said. He wasn't interested in acting as a judge. He didn't have much sympathy for the situation of these people. For him, the most important thing was to complete the task given by His Majesty. At the same time, he had to avoid the mercenary aristocrats and businessmen from ruining His Majesty's reputation. I understand. Old Feline bowed his head. I'll pay attention next time. Marl shrugged his shoulders after Old Feline left. You're really working hard. It's not hard to work for His Majesty, is it? Marl looked at the increasingly crowded town. Even the purchase of death row prisoners has to be done so carefully. Should I say that His Majesty Wimbledon did it on purpose? Or is he naturally compassionate? According to my brother, His Majesty is almost the same age as me. But he's already the indisputable king of a country. The two should be opposed to each other. Now even his personal guard is so outstanding. I really want to meet him in person. It's not difficult to meet the King of Grey Castle with the identity of the 3 families, Sean said expressionlessly. Besides, if I were you, I wouldn't say these words in front of that guard. It doesn't matter. You don't like to be secretive, do you? Marl spread out his hands. Sean could see that this guy was a friendly person. He was indeed the second son of the Tokat family. He was quite similar to Oro Tokat, who was rumored to be enthusiastic and loyal. The best way to deal with this kind of person was to ignore him. He turned around and was about to go to the dump area where the First Army was stationed to have a look. Suddenly, a soldier ran up to him. Your Excellency, a stranger wants to see you. He claims to know the whereabouts of the treasure. Sean frowned. Since the news about the cursed treasure had spread, such a person would come to him every few days. However, so far, they were all swindlers who came for the bounty. Didn't I say not to inform me before getting specific clues? That person wants to see you, the soldier replied. He also said that he's the last survivor of Hermes. In addition to the whereabouts of the treasure, he also knows the whereabouts of the church's exiles. We've got him under control. Hermes, the church. Chapter 1095. In a tent. Sean carefully looked at the man tied to a chair. The latter did not look away or make a fuss. He just stared at Sean calmly. This kind of silence was not a look that would appear on a snitch. When he was still in the Old King's City, Sean had seen many betrayals and betrayals. Although the enemy's rebellion could only be beneficial to him, the ugliness of greed, flattery, and impatience would not be pleasing to the eye just because of a little benefit. The guard could not help but feel curious. After staring at each other for a while, he broke the silence. Name? Joe, the man replied. Are you the commander here? I don't mean the Lord of Thorntown or anywhere else, but the commander of the Grey Castle troops. Is that important? If it's not, I won't say anything because it's meaningless. Interesting. Sean leaned forward a little and said, I'm the captain of the guards of His Majesty Roland Wimbledon, the King of Grey Castle, and also the captain of the Grey Castle exploration team. You can call me Sean. Now that you've met the person you want to see, can you tell me the whereabouts of the treasure? If you came all the way to the Cage Mountain for the Temple of the Cursed, then you must be looking for the magic ceremony cube, Joe said bluntly. And the magic ceremony cube is now in the hands of Earl Lorenzo of Archduke Island. Sean couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He had thought that the other party would first discuss the conditions, then beat around the bush to give him some clues. As for whether it was true or not, it would take some time to verify it. He didn't expect the other party to be so straightforward. Have you seen that thing? No, but it's not a secret to the church. Joe briefly told Sean about how the church plundered the kingdom of Wolfheart. At that time, Lorenzo, who was in charge of this mission, made a big deal about the treasure in his report. Many higher-ups knew about it, but the holy city of Hermes didn't pay much attention to it. I see. The treasure went to the kingdom of Wolfheart for 100 years, and was later found by the church. This makes sense, Sean said while stroking his chin. But why did you tell me about it? If you want to sell this information to other lords, it's not meaningless, is it? Joe took a deep breath and asked, Sir, have you heard of the God's Punishment Army? Of course, the secret army that the church is proud of, Sean said with a mocking smile. Unfortunately, they were defeated by His Majesty's First Army in the Battle of Coldwind Ridge. That's good. However, the other party did not show any indignation. The next part will be easy to explain. Lorenzo has the God's Punishment Army under his command, so no one except the King of Grey Castle would dare to attack the Archduke Island. Oh. The guard raised his eyebrows and said, I thought these humanoid beasts all died in the bomb craters in Coldwind Ridge. How many God's Punishment warriors does he have? 10. No, about 5, Joe hesitated. Not too many. If you want to break into the castle, the 5 of you are a big threat. Sean smiled and said noncommittally, So what do you want from me? Or, how much is the price of this information? No, I just want to survive, Joe said in a low voice. The church is no longer a match for Grey Castle, but those exiles are still unwilling to give up. Lorenzo is still targeting you. His people may have already sneaked into Thorntown, and I don't want to be dragged into this mess. He paused for a moment and said, If this information is useful, the King of Grey Castle will pardon me, right? Did he really do this to save his life? Sean put his hands on the table and rested his chin on his hand, which was a gesture that His Majesty often made when interrogating people. Although he did not have the magical ability of Lady Nightingale, sometimes he did not need magic to distinguish truth from falsehood. At least, he did not sense any desire to live in this man who called himself Joe. Especially when they looked at each other, the indifference in his eyes showed that he had made a decision. Perhaps even Joe did not realize that this was the look of a man who was determined to die. Is that all? Yes. Then I'll arrange for someone to send you to Neverwinter. Huh. Joe sensed that something was wrong. Why do I have to go to Neverwinter? Sean stood up and said, I don't have the power to pardon you, nor can I abandon you. So sending you to Neverwinter is the safest choice. Don't worry, His Majesty's benevolence and justice have long been known to Grey Castle, and the Witch Union has ways to verify the credibility of the information. If you're not lying, you'll definitely receive a reasonable verdict. Pardon is just a basic treatment. If you're lucky, you may even receive a large reward. My lord. The treasure. Joe also wanted to stand up, but he was tied to the chair by a rope and could not move at all. If it's really in the hands of Earl Lorenzo, it'll belong to His Majesty sooner or later. Besides, the treasure has nothing to do with you, right? Sean spread out his hands and said, There's nothing to worry about. Although the journey is a little long and your actions will be restricted before the news is confirmed, everything will be paid off in the end. You won't have to worry about the threat of the church anymore. He looked at the soldier and said, Take him away. No, my lord, wait. Joe's expression changed. His indifference was instantly replaced by panic and helplessness. He forced himself to stand up, and then fell to the ground. Please don't send me to Neverwinter. His voice was filled with unimaginable grief, as if he had been pretending to be so. Even Sean could not help but stop in his tracks. He was not even afraid of death, but he still showed such an expression. It was really incomprehensible. Why? Sean turned around and asked. Or is this not your only request? Please save her. Save Farina, please. Joe gnawed the soil on the ground and shouted desperately, There's no time, she doesn't have time. In the end, the man was choked with sobs. This is probably the truth. Sean thought to himself. He walked to the trembling Joe and patted him on the shoulder. Who's Farina? Why doesn't she have time? I think we can talk about it now. After Joe gradually calmed down and listened to the whole story, Sean finally understood what was going on. Everything was related to love. Joe was the real exile of the church, and the former bishop had now become their enemy. It was not surprising that Joe had turned to the First Army of Grey Castle, the former enemy of the church. Traitors were always more hateful than foreign enemies. At the same time, Sean also understood why Joe was so determined to die. Joe did not think that he could hide it from the First Army forever. Perhaps in his eyes, it was better to send himself and Farina to the gallows than to be tortured by Lorenzo. If he had spread the news slowly, it might have worked in a few months, but he chose to take the risk himself. Even if Lorenzo would not deliberately torture Farina to death in order to find the Holy Book, there was a limit to the endurance and recovery of a human body. If he waited for half a year before triggering Greycastle's action, it would be too late. Originally, the conflict between the church and the church had nothing to do with Sean, but because of love, the information was reliable. Now he only needed to find the spy sent by Earl Lorenzo to confirm everything. Chapter 1096. So you're going to help him? Marl Tokat frowned. A remnant of the church? After taking Joe away, the captain of the guards immediately summoned the special envoy of the City of Glow and told him the whole story. He was not worried that the three families would covet the treasure. After all, no one knew its real use. If it was a powerful and rare treasure, it would not have been able to escape from the Kingdom of Dawn in the first place. It's not up to me to decide whether to help or not, Sean said indifferently. The order I received was to find the whereabouts of the treasure as much as possible. Now that I've finally found a seemingly credible clue, I naturally have to further confirm it. As for what to do next, His Majesty will decide. He paused and looked at Marl. So, do you have a good plan, Mr. Envoy? The First Army was invincible, but it needed an enemy. Soldiers were not good at searching for spies in the dark, so it was better to leave it to the three families. To be honest, I wish I had never heard of this. Marl shrugged. If it weren't for the church, Quinn wouldn't have been driven out of the Kingdom of Dawn. Maybe she would have been my brother's wife. Ahem, but since you've asked, I can only help you to the end. Although a lot of people have come to the town recently, it's not difficult to find a specific group. A specific group? That's right. Since we can't cross the Cage Mountain, the nearest way from the Kingdom of Wolfheart to here is by sea. Coral Bay, a port city located northeast of Thorntown. Marl said while counting his fingers. Marl counted with his fingers and said, There are about 10 to 15 people coming from the east. Some of them might even speak the Kingdom of Wolfheart's accent or dress style. Based on these criteria, we can narrow the target down to 2 or 3 groups, no more than 5 groups. Because the big city in the east only has Coral Bay? Sean said thoughtfully. For example, people coming to Neverwinter from the east might come from all over Greycastle, but those coming from the west were basically demons. When we find these people, we'll detain them and interrogate them again. That's right. Marl nodded. And the spy you're looking for is probably among them. The problem is who will do it. Is there anyone who knows the town better than the local rats? Problems that can be solved with money are usually not problems. In order to show the sincerity of the three families, the Tokat family will bear the cost. In a house on the outskirts of Thorntown, the butler of the Archduke Island Earl, Hagrid, was chasing away the mosquitoes around him impatiently. There wasn't even a tent for ventilation in this damned broken place. He thought angrily. Flying insects were everywhere even before summer arrived. Wouldn't it be impossible to treat people in another 2 months? However, they still had no clue why the magic ceremony cube would glow. He wasn't even sure if the king of Greycastle was after the treasures in the cursed temple. What did he do during this period of time? According to the information collected by his subordinates, the exploration team of Grey Castle had arrived in Thorntown 2 months ago. After that, they built roads in the mountain and recruited condemned prisoners. It seemed that they were afraid that the whole world would not know what they were doing. They had also turned the temple on the hillside upside down. Every day, bricks and stones would be transported down from the mountain and placed in an open space guarded by guards. It would make sense if they did all this to find the buried treasures. However, the fact was that Grey Castle seemed to be more interested in the stones than the treasures. He had observed the open space from afar. After the bricks and stones were dried, they would be loaded onto carriages and sent to the Coral Bay in the east. Hagrid could not understand why the king of Grey Castle wanted these black stones. He had tried to steal some of the stones from the temple from the port, and had ordered his men to bring them back to Earl Lorenzo. However, as he had expected, the magic ceremony cube did not regain its legendary power. The key to the ancient treasure's reaction must be something else. "Sir, we have brought the person you are looking for." Suddenly, a subordinate lifted the curtain and reported to Hagrid. "Let him in." Hagrid quickly tightened his bow tie and sat up straight. "Yes." Then a villager was pushed into the room. He knelt on the ground and looked up carefully. "Sir, my name is Naf. Do you want to go up the mountain? As long as you don't cross the peak, I can take you anywhere. I heard that when the people of Grey Castle first came to the Cage Mountain, you were their guide." Hagrid interrupted. Yes, sir." Slap. Hagrid threw a small pouch in front of him. "There are 20 golden dragon stones in this pouch. If you can tell me something that interests me, it's yours." Of course, sir. I will tell you everything," Naf replied excitedly. "Tell me the whole story first. Don't miss any details," Hagrid said, glancing contemptuously at the man at his feet and leaning back in his chair. When Naf told the story of a group of people climbing the Cage Mountain, he suddenly opened his eyes. "Wait, what did you just say?" "The witch called Ozima." "No, the second sentence." She held up a coin and said, "This way." "A coin?" Hagrid asked. "What kind of coin?" It looked ordinary. It didn't look like a silver wolf or a bronze eagle. Naf thought for a moment. Yes, it didn't even have a pattern on it. It seemed to be just a polished sheet. Did the witch hold it up all the time? Hagrid felt that he had vaguely grasped the key point. "Most of the time," the guide said. "Now that you mention it, I also remember that the witches were leading the way, and every time they turned, the witches would put the coin in front of their eyes, as if they were staring at something. Damn it, it really has something to do with these mutants." Hagrid clenched his fists. "Where is the witch called Ozima now?" I don't know." Naf shook his head. "She left Thorntown a few days later. Maybe she went back to Grey Castle? If it was only a few days, then the witch must have left Cage Mountain before he set off." However, the reaction of the magic ceremony cube did not stop, which meant, the coin was left here? Hagrid thought quickly. It was probably not a coin at all, but a key that the king of Grey Castle had found in other ruins. Since it was so important, the keeper must be the leader of the exploration team. He had already inquired about this information. At present, the two highest-ranking people in the Grey Castle team were the chief commander, Sean, and the special envoy of the three noble families, Marl. Compared with the second son of a noble family, the king's guard was more likely to be tempted. Most castles in the world were often conquered from the inside. How many golden dragons would they have to prepare to break through his defense? 500, or 1,000? But Hagrid knew that no matter how much it was, the Earl would be willing to pay for the secret of the magic cube. As long as he could get in touch with the Earl, he would not be far from the answer. Hagrid could not help but feel excited. If he could get his hands on that key, he would definitely be highly appreciated by Count Lorenzo. Maybe he could even be promoted to a liege. After all, there was no rule that only lords could use the magic cube. While he was imagining a wonderful future, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside the door. "Wait, who are you?" "Ah!" Hagrid heard a series of banging sounds. Before he could react, the door was violently kicked open. A group of uninvited guests in patrol uniforms rushed into the room and pressed him to the ground. Hagrid struggled to adjust his bow tie. I am a legal merchant. You can't do this to me. If you want money, I'll try my best to cooperate. Chapter 1097. Twin Dragon Island hasn't been this lively for a long time. Standing at the top of the bridge tower of the Snow Wind, Thunder sighed with emotion as he looked down at the bustling pier. Thousands of people were gathered here, moving boxes after boxes of supplies onto the ships. From a bird's-eye view, they looked like ants lined up in a column. Shouts, horns, and the rustling of the waves on the beach were mixed together, forming the main melody before setting sail. On the other side of the pier, there were all kinds of sailing ships with their freeboard against each other. The tall masts rose and fell one after another, resembling an endless chain of mountain peaks. The flags fluttering on the peaks indicated which fleets belonged to: Crescent Moon Bay, Sunset Island, Shallow Water City. These important chambers of commerce in the fjords were now gathered here, waiting for the moment to set sail. The last time he saw such a grand occasion was when he was 22 years old, when he gathered his team and set sail for the Shadow Waters. Not only Twin Dragon Island, Marjorie said with a smile. I should say that the whole fjords has been stirred up by the news you brought back. A seemingly worthless route has now become the focus of attention. It's safe, stable, and has the opportunity to become a real explorer. The new generation is born in a good era. Thunder also raised the corner of his mouth. He knew that Marjorie was talking about the festive harbor route. As long as you find a novel relic in the Endless Cape, you can exchange it for a reward from the King of Grey Castle. When the news was brought back to the fjords, it immediately caused a great commotion. The title of adventurer was very attractive to the fjords people. It not only represented fame, but also represented wealth. However, it was not easy to find a new route, island, or major secret. It required a lot of investment, and there was a possibility of losing everything, or even losing one's life. However, the recruitment notice from the King of Grey Castle changed everything. The route from the fjords to the Endless Cape was a very mature one, and the new port city of Festive meant a business opportunity. Even if they could not find anything there, at least they could sell some goods, and they would not suffer a loss. If he really found something good, it would naturally be killing two birds with one stone. Furthermore, the information clearly stated that these ancient relics might be related to a huge secret about the three gods. As long as one could contribute to unraveling the secret, one would have the chance to receive the title of Lifetime Honorary Explorer, conferred by Grey Castle. Although Grey Castle, as a land kingdom, was different from the Fjord Islands, it was an indisputable standard no matter where it was. In other words, the Fjord Islands valued it more. After all, it was related to the three gods that they believed in. Because the news brought back by Thunder was so attractive, there were also a small number of people who raised doubts, but these doubts did not affect the enthusiasm of the merchants to go south. The reputation of the King of Grey Castle had spread as early as when chaos drinks and perfume swept the entire fjord's market. As more and more goods came from the other side of the channel and steam paddle steamers became more and more common, the name Roland Wimbledon was often mentioned, and the idea that Neverwinter was incomparably rich was deeply rooted in people's hearts. The establishment of the Allied Chamber of Commerce further strengthened people's confidence. Since the big employer was the king of a country, and a very powerful one at that, what was wrong with asking for a higher price? After the news spread, almost all the idle people in the fjords began to take action, so that the islands were divided into two groups. The experienced and courageous group tried every means to board Thunder's fleet, while the stable group, which hoped to be lucky, set sail to the Endless Cape and strive for a good position in the festive harbor. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Thunder would not have imagined that a country across the sea could have such a great impact on the fjords. After all, such a change had only occurred in the past 1 or 2 years. All thanks to you. He looked at the distant sea line that looked like silver wires. Without you to manage the Chamber of Commerce for me, I wouldn't have been able to devote myself to one adventure after another. To be honest, except for exploring, I don't have any strong points. I'm not even a qualified father. I've left all the chores to you over the years. I really owe you too much. You should know that I'm doing all of this out of my own free will. Margaret pressed her hand on the back of his. Wouldn't it be too much of a letdown to someone who doesn't ask for anything in return be a little too much? Besides, we're going on a long voyage, so it's better not to say such things. Marjorie. Thunder shifted his gaze and looked into her eyes. Of course, it's not right to say that I'm not asking for any reward at all. I actually have something that I want. Margaret blinked her eyes. So, just take it that I have something else in mind. Don't feel like you owe me anything. Thunder naturally knew what she wanted. Back in Neverwinter, when he saw Lightning getting along well with her, he did not think there was anything wrong with it. Now that he thought about it, he had long been accustomed to her existence. The strange thing was that he never hesitated in the slightest when he was on an adventure, whether it was a hurricane or a big wave. But in this regard, he found it particularly difficult to ask. Just as Thunder hesitated whether to turn over his hand and hold her palm, the first mate's voice interrupted their time alone. "Boss!" The latter stood on the deck of the bridge and shouted, "The caravan is basically ready. We're just waiting for your order." Thunder coughed twice and said, "Got it. I'll be right there." "Okay." He took a deep breath and looked at Marjorie. "It's time to set off. Go ahead." Marjorie nodded with a smile. "Do what you're best at, just like His Majesty said." "Well," Thunder said, "to the new world." He walked down the tower, passed through the bridge, and walked along the deck to the bow of the ship, facing the people on the dock. There was a burst of enthusiastic cheers from below. Thunder waved his hand and said, "I think everyone already knows the route we're going to take this time. So far, the farthest the fjords have been to is the Shadow Waters. But for the swirling sea, it's just like stepping out of home. This time, we'll cross the Shadow Waters, cross the incredible ceiling, and head to a place further east, the empty land that no one has ever set foot on. I once saw an extremely vast land in the Shadow Ruins, which is not inferior to the territory of the Four Kingdoms. Where is it? Will it be east of the ceiling?" These are all exciting questions, and this time, we're going to find the answer. If it really exists, then the fjords people will completely say goodbye to the narrow and scarce land and no longer have to worry about living space. At the same time, it may bring us more wealth than all the routes so far combined. This is also the reason why I welcome anyone with ability to join us. With such a great return, even if there are more people to share it, it will be enough. He paused for a moment, waiting for the cheers of the crowd to subside, and then continued. But apart from gold royals and fame, what I want is something else. That is, the fjords will be remembered in history. There are few records of us in the history books of the Four Kingdoms. The fjords have neither a century-old family, nor a supreme king. It is far away from the mainland, like an isolated island, and almost no influence except for the caravan. But this situation will not last forever. When we open up a new fertile land for all mankind, and bring a broad vision that subverts common sense, history will forever record us, and every explorer who embarks on a fearless journey. I hope you can understand that the significance of this expedition is not only for the present, but also for the future. Raise the sails, guys. Thunder raised his arms high. Set sail to the new world. Below, countless hands also rose up, and everyone's voices resounded through the sky. Chapter 1098. Grey Castle, City of Neverwinter. Roland was sitting at his desk, listening to a call from the front line of the fertile plains. Of course, it was not entirely accurate to say that it was the front line. Considering the speed of signal attenuation, it was only wide enough for a call between Neverwinter and Longsong. Before the invention of the repeater amplifier, this was also the maximum distance of a handheld phone. However, this did not mean that it was impossible to break through this limit. The simplest way was to let Leaf act as a relay. In the state of the heart of forest, her consciousness could cover the entire misty forest, which meant that she could transmit messages faster than Lightning, who could fly at the speed of sound. The frontline only needed to call Leaf, and then Leaf would relay the message to Roland. In a sense, this could be regarded as a real-time communication. "The current situation is going well," Leaf said in a low voice, imitating Iron Axe's tone. "As you expected, the demons have launched several destructive attacks on the railway, but the impact on logistics and transportation is not significant. Without the help of the spider demons, they would have to land near the tracks and move the tracks with brute force. They would have to evacuate before the Black River got close to the tracks. The Ministry of Engineering would be able to repair the damaged tracks without having to replace the tracks. It seems that the armored train has played its role. Indeed, Your Majesty. It can be used as a small stronghold, whether it's for mobile rescue or railway maintenance. The only regret is that the number of trains is still too small. If possible, I'd like to arrange a Black River between each station. It's easy for you to think about it. Roland couldn't help but grin. In addition to the armored train, the freight train also needs to be produced, and this part of the work is still inseparable from the witches. Now that we have two, it's already very good. Continue to push forward the front line, and try to complete the general attack before midsummer. Yes, Your Majesty, Leaf replied in a low, muffled voice. Actually, you don't have to imitate my nasal voice. Roland coughed. By the way, are there any signs of the demons launching another large-scale attack? A week ago, he had been woken up by Nightingale in the middle of the night, and learned that the First Army had been attacked. He had been really nervous for a while, but fortunately, Anna had told him that the loss was not big and Edith had calmed the people down. Only then did Roland feel relieved. In fact, the First Army's weakness had always been fighting in a lightless or dimly lit environment. Not being able to see the target would greatly reduce the killing efficiency of the hot weapons. Moreover, there was no way to mass-produce the tracer bullets, so they had to rely on the witch's abilities to a large extent. Who would have thought that the demons would choose to launch their first attack at night? Not only did they understand Sylvie's magic eye thoroughly, but they also realized the nature of guns and cannons. They dispersed their formation, and even crawled forward. Fortunately, the demons did not have enough weapons to fight against them, and the First Army had executed all the requirements of the emergency combat training. Otherwise, the result would be hard to predict. If it's an attack like the last night attack, we didn't find any signs of it, Leaf said. Miss Sylvie spends 1 or 2 hours every day to check the places that the demons must pass through. She also takes the magic arc or the seagull out to investigate from time to time. At least it's safe so far. What did the general staff say? They think there are 2 possibilities. One is that the demons have sensed our change and can't use the same trick again. The other is that the demons have limited forces and can't plan 2 large-scale attacks in a short period of time. Really? Roland said thoughtfully. What worried him the most in the last attack was not only the demon's amazing learning ability, but also the senior demon who was the attacker. It was not the first time that something like this had happened. Now that he thought about it, since the first senior demon appeared behind the snow mountain, Neverwinter had fought with this kind of special evolved demons 4 times. Hundreds of years ago, the senior demons were the generals of the army. The Union could only kill them after sending out the blessed army to defeat them head-on. But now, the status of the senior demons had obviously declined, and the frequency of their appearance had increased, which was not good news. The God's Punishment Army, which was an extraordinary army with brute force, could still deal with them. However, if a group of senior demons with various abilities broke into the camp, they would have to pray for God's blessing. Since there was no special way to deal with the demons, Roland could only think of a universal solution, such as constantly pursuing more powerful firepower and completely wiping out the demons before they could take action. The demons will never let their foothold on the fertile plains be threatened by human beings. Continue to be vigilant, and don't give them any chance to take advantage of us. Understood. Leaf raised her voice and then said in a normal tone, Your Majesty, Iron Axe has hung up. Phew. Roland gently exhaled. Who's the next person to report? It's the Minister of Construction, Car Van Bate. The Ministry of Construction? He was a little surprised. With sufficient materials and manpower, there shouldn't be any difficulties in the project. Bring it in. Your Majesty. Leaf imitated Car's voice again. Although it was not as difficult to distinguish as Echo's voice, she sounded quite good with the swaying branches and rubbing leaves. The construction team has encountered some trouble recently. I think we may need help from other departments in the administrative office. Is this girl addicted to it? What the Minister of Construction wanted to report was very simple. After the night attack, many workers were frightened and their morale was obviously low. Moreover, the construction of the railway was a long project, and many foremen found that their workers were slacking. Carr hoped to change shifts or call relatives to improve morale. After all, not everyone was willing to take risks in pursuit of high pay. Therefore, Roland focused on the second method. Relatives? I remember that more than 70% of the workers who applied to build the railway are immigrants, and many of them don't have a complete family. If the polarization is too obvious, I'm afraid it will cause a worse impact. I've also considered this, Your Majesty. Leif replied on behalf of Roland. Before the railway construction team set out, they issued a transfer contract. I think maybe we can use the person designated in the contract to replace the relatives. Since they're willing to entrust everything to the other party after their sacrifice, they must be very important to them. In a sense, they can be regarded as relatives. Chapter 1099. After ending the conversation with the frontline, Nightingale placed a silver-white sealing ring on Roland's desk. This was a special buckle for flying messengers. It was made of 2 pieces of aluminum, and could hold a palm-sized curled paper inside. It was much more advanced than the original method of tying the paper directly to the claws. Coupled with Soroya's special, ultra-thin paper, the amount of information transmitted in secret letters had increased significantly. As the probability of accidents happening to the flying messengers was not negligible after the distance exceeded 500 kilometers, all administrative offices had set up relay nodes. In order to efficiently sort secret letters, the buckle was also printed with identification numbers, which were equivalent to the train tickets of the modern world. With just a glance, one would know where the secret letter came from, and where it was to be delivered. The letter C on the buckle represented that it came from the Kingdom of Dawn. When Roland set this system for the sake of confidentiality, he directly used the Pinyin abbreviation instead of the standard characters commonly used by the 4 kingdoms. From Thorntown in the Kingdom of Dawn? He raised his eyebrows. When did you get it? Just 10 minutes ago, Honey came, Nightingale replied. But I saw you were on the phone, so I didn't interrupt you. Did they find something new in the Cage Mountain ruins? Roland pried open the buckle and unfolded the letter. The content of the letter was a little long, and it took him half a minute to understand the situation that the guards had encountered recently. I didn't expect that there would be a day when the church would ask for help from Grey Castle. Putting down the letter, Roland could not help but sigh. Although he knew that once they gave up on Hermes, they would never have a chance to make a comeback, but it was not a problem for them to go to a remote place and become a powerful force. In the end, the one who gave the fugitives a fatal blow was the former bishop of the church. He had to admit that it was really a dramatic ending. What happened to the group of stray dogs who abandoned the orphans in the monastery in the Holy City? Nightingale asked curiously. If what the letter says is true, the church has almost ceased to exist. Roland handed the letter to him. Their last hope has betrayed them. Nightingale looked at him after reading the letter. What do you plan to do then? Since the butler of the Count of Archduke Island has confessed everything, and we also know the whereabouts of the relics, it's only a matter of time before we send someone to the kingdom of Wolfheart. Roland tapped the table and said, if the magic ceremony cube can react to the highly concentrated uranium, then the murals in the murals may not be purely artistic. No matter what it was used for, it was best for Neverwinter to control it. As for the captured church agent Farina, he paused. Bring her back with Joe for trial. That does sound like your answer. Nightingale smiled. I thought you wouldn't like the answer. Roland deliberated over his words. After all, the church had once persecuted you cruelly. I did hate the church and I even hated humans. Nightingale said frankly. But since I found out that Alice, who is also a witch, was behind all this and that everything she did was for the sake of her own survival, I changed my mind. It's hard to hate her anymore. I only feel that she's pitiful and pathetic. Besides, the church that was supported by the Starfall City has disappeared. Even if I want to take revenge, I can't find a target. Did you hate humans? Roland asked in surprise. It would be strange if I didn't hate them. Nightingale glared at him. I can't control my magic awakening, and I didn't use it to do evil. Why should I be driven away like a rat on the street? Since you see me as an alien, why should I get along with you? That's probably what I thought at that time. And I dare say that most witches have similar feelings. Is that why you showed up in my bedroom with a dagger in the first place? At that time, I had already restrained myself enough. Nightingale burst into laughter. The idea of hating humans was just a vague idea, but hating the nobles was a real thing. If Anna hadn't fallen into your hands, I wouldn't have had the patience to sit down and talk with you. Have you forgotten my former title? Well, he didn't. He was the Shadow Killer, the deadly ghost that once made the entire noble circle in the old king's city shudder. So your desire at that time was? It was a pretense. Nightingale covered her mouth and said, if I could make you reveal your true nature, Anna would have a deeper understanding of what nobles are. Unfortunately. Unfortunately what? Are you regretting that you couldn't persuade Anna to leave Border Town? Or are you regretting that your desire didn't work? Roland said grumpily. It seems that I was really lucky at that time. When you have hatred in your heart, it's easy to go to extremes. Nightingale patted him on the shoulder. It didn't take me long to realize that there were aliens like you among the nobles, just like me. Maybe it's not a bad idea to try to trust you. Should I say thank you for your approval? You're welcome, she said confidently. As for later, there were also pure witches among the witches. Even existences like Zero. Naturally, those immature ideas disappeared without a trace. Really? It's not easy for you. Roland sighed. Why do I feel that you're a little depressed? Nightingale leaned over, and the ends of her hair fell on his cheek. I pretended to be depressed in the beginning, but it doesn't mean that I'll pretend to be depressed in the future. For example, now. As soon as her voice died away, she disappeared into the mist. When she reappeared, she was leaning on the recliner with dried fish in her mouth, and winking at him proudly. Roland gritted his teeth and stood up. When he was about to teach her a lesson, and let her know who the real king of Grey Castle was, his phone suddenly rang. It was the hotline of the director of the administrative office. He gave Nightingale a wait-and-see look and picked up the phone. Your Majesty, Barov's voice soon came from the other end of the line. A special visitor has come to the old king's city. He said that he wants to see you no matter what. It was not common for the hand of the king to personally introduce a guest to him. Oh, who's he? The dramatist, His Excellency Cajun Fells. Barov sounded a little excited. Why him again? Roland frowned. Didn't I make it very clear in the letter that I refused him? I have a lot of things to do. If he doesn't have anything urgent. Yes, Your Majesty. Barov hurriedly told him the purpose of Cajun's visit. Are you sure? Roland was a little surprised. Yes, he said it himself. The steward said solemnly. Chapter 1100. This was the first time that Roland had seen this famous actor and playwright when he walked into the hall. Half of his hair had already turned white, and most of his cheeks were surrounded by a fluffy beard. He was wearing a pressed black suit, and his collar was meticulously tied. He looked like a character who had walked out of a portrait, and he was filled with a strong sense of the times. If his mugshot was hung on the classroom wall with a famous quote, it wouldn't look out of place at all. Although he was old, his eyes were still bright and full of vigor. After bowing, his eyes were fixed on Roland without looking away. Obviously, this was not the first time for this playwright to be received by the royal family. Your Majesty, this is His Excellency Cajun Fells, Barov said, rubbing his hands together. He's the most accomplished playwright in Grey Castle. His reputation has a certain influence in the Four Kingdoms. When I was still in the old king's city, I was a frequent visitor to the Central Grand Theatre to enjoy the performances of Cajun's troupe. Look at how happy you are. Roland twitched his mouth. You're already the hand of the king. Can't you be more mature? Salute to you, Your Majesty Wimbledon, Cajun said with a hand on his chest. Cajun put his hand on his chest and said, I think now I know why you didn't like the new play. Oh. Roland sat down on the main seat. Tell me about it. You're too young, Cajun replied slowly. Younger than I thought. Do you mean that people without a certain level of experience can't appreciate your plays? If Roland had been the lord of Border Town for the first time, he would have been displeased by Cajun's answer. However, having been in this position for a long time, Roland no longer cared about verbal confrontations. Nevertheless, his relaxed tone showed his attitude. Bhairav, who was standing beside Roland, secretly winked at Cajun. No, Your Majesty, when I say young, I don't mean your age but your mental state, Cajun Fells said, shaking his head. It doesn't start from 0, nor does it end at 100. I've seen many nobles in the prime of their lives, but their spirits are old. Similarly, those who have entered their twilight years do not necessarily grow old. At this point, he laughed self-deprecatingly. I thought I was young enough, but after seeing you, I realized that it really has no limits. Should I take that as a compliment? Roland raised his eyebrows. Mental youth cannot be measured by good or bad, Your Majesty. To Lin Sanjia's surprise, Cajun did not continue the conversation as he had expected. Spiritual youthfulness is accompanied by aggressiveness, fearlessness, curiosity, and so on. It can push a person forward, but it can also make him lose himself. Sometimes it can even lead to destruction, so. Ahem, Lord Cajun. Bhairav interrupted in a low voice. I'm sorry, I just said it casually. The drama master came back to his senses. I'm old and I've seen a lot of people. It's normal for me to have some strange ideas. Please forgive me. It doesn't matter. Roland waved his hand. He had a better impression of Cajun. Let's get back to business. I heard from Bhairav that you're planning to take on my script or join the Starflower troupe. Why? Cajun answered directly. I want to know more about the magic movie. I see. You want to achieve your goal in a roundabout way after being rejected by me, even if you're going to perform some plays that you despise. I don't despise those plays. Roland explained. I just think that a play should be carefully prepared so that the actors can continue to improve. Otherwise, it'll be a waste of energy and talent, and it'll disappoint the audience. But your audience isn't a nobleman, and I don't have that much time to wait for you to rehearse. If you join the Starflower troupe, you'll probably be forced to perform plays that are far from perfect. If that happens, your reputation as a drama master will be ruined. Even so, are you still willing to perform? Your Majesty, I. So don't join the Starflower troupe. Of course, Roland would not allow Cajun to say that he was willing. And the plays I'm planning to perform will need a certain audience base, which is limited to the Starflower troupe. I'm afraid that there won't be any suitable plays for you in a short time. This time, it was Bhairav's turn to give Roland a wink. But Roland ignored the director's wink. It's not entirely impossible. Please go ahead. Cajun could not help leaning forward slightly. In fact, I'm planning to write a play with a theme related to love. It's about the flower of love in the darkest times. And the background is the period when the Church of Hermes set things right. Roland unhurriedly explained his plan. I've heard that you're best at love and redemption, so I'll take it as a test. If you can make this play a great success, I'll consider your request during the next shooting of the magic movie. What do you think? Ever since they had occupied both the old and new holy cities, Neverwinter's propaganda had changed. The real pope had been persecuted and killed by the fake pope who had done all kinds of evil deeds. Now the new agent would fully support Grey Castle to resist the threat of the Battle of Divine Will. After more than a year of propaganda, the new history had a certain audience base. Now it was time to go further and reveal the so-called Battle of Faith and the origin of the church. Once this was done, the new church would not only separate itself from the usurper, but also from the church that had persecuted witches in history. It would become a part of Neverwinter's regime. You mean this play is based on the truth? Cajun murmured. Can I meet the two people in the story? They're still in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Their rescue team hasn't set off yet. Roland shrugged. And I think you understand what I mean. Of course. the dramatist said with a nod. The plays I wrote were also based on the legends of the royal family. I tried my best to avoid using any real surnames or family histories. But what? Cajun hesitated for a moment, but soon made up his mind. Your Majesty, this is an unprecedented attempt for me. If it's possible, I'd like to join your rescue team and watch the whole operation. It'll be a great help to the rehearsal of the play. Even if you go to the kingdom of Wolfheart? Roland was slightly moved. I don't think I can imagine all the details, and I don't want to miss this opportunity, Cajun said frankly. Please don't worry. I'm in good health, and I'll be accompanied by my apprentices. I won't cause any trouble for your team. Chapter 1101. After the dramatist left, Berev immediately came up to Roland and said anxiously and pitifully, Your Majesty, why didn't you agree to his request? It's synonymous with Greycastle's plays. Other troops can't even dream of joining. I'm not saying that the Starflower troupe isn't good, but Ms. May is not as famous. If Cajun Fells joins, the Starflower troupe will be the best troupe in the kingdom. Even if he knows nothing about the magic movie, he'll be able to attract a large number of actors with his name alone. The troupe won't have to worry about manpower anymore. Roland rolled his eyes at him and said, Haven't you heard that the easier it is to get something, the less it will be cherished? The old butler could not help but be taken aback. Please forgive me for my ignorance. Which person or book said this? I said that, Roland said, pretending to be serious. It's human nature. Do you understand? He has been attracted by the magic movie, and will stay in Neverwinter no matter what. In this case, a difficult test will naturally leave a deeper impression on him than a direct answer. He might even be grateful to me for giving him this opportunity. Otherwise, it will make him feel that everything is natural. This is the difference between the two. He paused for a moment and said, Besides, May is only a disciple in front of Cajun. How can the Starflower troupe be called Starflower troupe if it has a dramatist? It's not a big problem for him to participate in the shooting of the magic movie. If he's not in the troupe, he can give the younger members some pressure. You're right, Berev said hesitantly. But about going to the kingdom of Wolfheart? There's nothing to worry about, Roland interrupted him directly. It's his choice. I also want to see what kind of play Cajun can put on. By the way, you don't have time to worry about others. Have you finished the statistical work I asked you to do? If not, hurry up and do it. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll take my leave now. Berev hurriedly bowed and left the parlor. You're becoming more and more like a king, Your Majesty Wimbledon. Nightingale appeared behind him and said with squinted eyes. Ahaha. You flatter me. Roland suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He hadn't heard her use honorifics in a long time. With our relationship, you don't have to use such a formal form of address. But why do I feel that it's not good to be too close? Nightingale crossed her arms and said, The easier it is to get something, the less one will cherish it. So this is your way of thinking. It seems that I have to be careful not to be too nice to you. Also, I have to remind Anna not to let a certain someone be too complacent. Roland felt cold sweat forming on his forehead. Oh well. Anyway, humans are humans, and the phantom is the phantom. They're not the same thing. And I wasn't the one who said it first. But you agree, Nightingale snorted softly. The magic power in my chest tells me that you're at least 55% credible. Now her ability to tell lies is accurate to 1 decimal place. Roland rubbed his forehead. Wait. Chest? He remembered Agatha said that although a witch's magic power would appear as a cyclone under observation, it was not a physical entity and would not really gather into a ball. Instead, it flowed in every corner of the body. Did you really use your ability just now? Roland questioned. Pfft. Nightingale laughed. It seems that you've found out. But it was you who said it. If the other sisters heard it, would they also feel that they're being taken for granted? 5 bottles of chaos drinks, Roland said. 10 bottles, each with a different taste. Nightingale licked her lips. Too many will make others suspicious. Suspicious of what? It'll be unfair. Don't worry. As long as I want to hide something, no one will find it. 8 bottles. If it's too easy to get, it'll... No, nothing. I'll think about it. In the end, Roland signed the unfair clause, at the cost of 10 bottles of chaos drinks. Looking at Nightingale, who returned triumphantly with a small dried fish in her arms, Roland shook his head helplessly. In the evening, Barov came up with a list of all the visitors. Lady Scroll and I have compared the family records and transfer contracts. Based on the principle of the former taking precedence, we have determined the first batch of candidates to go to the fertile plains. There are more than 1,600 people. He reported over the phone. The relevant visit plan is also being worked out. If everything goes well, they'll be able to set off in 2 days. Very good. Roland was sincerely satisfied with the efficiency of the administrative office. He was indeed the minister he had trained. Implement it as soon as possible. Yes, Your Majesty. But Your Majesty, one of the workers is registered as a witch. A witch? Roland raised his eyebrows. Yes. The worker's name is Snaketooth from the Longsong area. He used to be a Blackstreet rat, and the witch is Miss Paper. Paper. It suddenly occurred to Roland that when Petrov sent her here, he did mention her identity, as well as the small dispute that happened to happen upon. Is this person her former companion? Should we ignore it? Barov asked, probably because Roland did not speak for a long time. After all, Miss Paper has nothing to do with her past life. Roland interrupted his thoughts. Of course not. She said goodbye to her life as a rat, not her former companion. Don't forget that the key to eliminating the rats is to transform them. No matter who they used to be, they shouldn't be treated differently. A former Blackstreet rat, now an expeditionary worker. Roland slightly raised the corner of his mouth. They had been separated for almost 2 years and probably did not even know what had happened to each other. Even so, his companion still wrote the other party's name on the handover contract. This feeling was really not bad. I'll inform Paper, Roland said. Just carry out the rest as planned. As you wish, Your Majesty. In an open space southwest of Tower Station No. 1, the First Army was holding a simple funeral. Close to 300 pure white tombstones stood neatly in the middle of the lush grassland, appearing solemn and orderly. Although there was nothing buried under the tombstones, everyone stood solemnly as if their deceased comrades were standing in front of them. Here lie the brave warriors who sacrificed their lives to protect Tower Station No. 1. They did not retreat in the face of the ferocious and terrible enemies. Because they knew that Grey Castle was right behind them. They were His Majesty's sword and the high wall for the people of the kingdom. Their names will always be remembered by us. Their will be inherited by us. For His Majesty, for the kingdom of Grey Castle. Salute! Following Iron Axe's lead, everyone raised their right hands, and gave a military salute as a farewell. Lightning quietly landed on a barracks. In the front row of the crowd, she saw a familiar figure. Chapter 1102. When the crowd dispersed and the old man boarded the train again, Lightning flew into the cab through the rear window and landed quietly in the carriage. The old man stood in front of the console, looking down at the item in his hand motionlessly, like a silent statue. Looking at his back, she wanted to say something to comfort him, but she did not know what to say. It wasn't until she touched the half-open window in hesitation that the man noticed her presence. Ah, you're the little girl from the other day. The old man blinked in surprise. My name is Lightning. Lightning could not help but take a step back. Sorry, I see. You're here to comfort me, aren't you? He suddenly grinned. Oh really? I'm not old enough to need a little girl to comfort me. Sorry about that. But the ability of a witch is really convenient. I can go wherever I want. The old man did not look as sad as Lightning had imagined, which made her feel a little relieved. I'll knock first next time. I'm not blaming you, child. The old man put down the folding table on the wall and wiped it with his sleeve. Come sit here. I'll pour you a cup of tea. This is the only thing that can be used to entertain people. Thank you. Lightning slowly walked to the table and sat down. When she got closer, she found that it was a Neverwinter ID card on the console. My name is Wuxia, or you can call me by my nickname, Mr. Loud Voice. The kids on the train often call me that. The old man brought a cup of hot tea to the table. Did you attend the funeral? Lightning nodded and then shook her head. I just happened to fly over and watch for a while. That means you didn't lose any friends. That's really good news. She clenched the cup. Your son. Ah, his name is Robert, the third son in the family. He died fighting for the artillery position, Wuxia said calmly. The battalion commander said he was very brave. He is indeed very brave, Lightning said in a low voice. She had heard about the whole process of the battle from Sylvie. Without firepower support and the presence of the gods' punishment witches, it would have been impossible for a person to take such a step forward while facing the demon's spears without sufficient courage. In fact, Lao Sin used to be the most timid one. When he was mining in the mines, no matter how the foreman bullied him, he never dared to fight back. He would only come back and complain to me. Wuxia said with mixed feelings. Do you find it strange that I don't look so sad? The little girl was at a loss for words. No, it doesn't matter, the old man comforted her. Because I knew this day would come sooner or later. My third son and the other two sons all told me the same thing. What did they say? They said that they wanted to protect Neverwinter, their hometown, and everything they had worked so hard to get. The old man took a sip of tea. To be honest, I didn't understand at that time. I even asked why it was them and not others. Lightning was also wondering why. Wuxia seemed to read her mind. Their answer was that others had already been sacrificed. Since the beginning of the malicious fight against the demonic beasts, many people have died. It was the same when we fought against the Duke of Ryan and the church. If everyone thought about why it was them and not others, we would still be living like livestock in the mines, the old man said. The old man said, as long as it's a battle, there will inevitably be sacrifices. Whoever's turn is who's who. If no one is willing to go, there's no need to fight this battle. In the end, we'll still be at the mercy of the enemy. That's what they told me. I don't know whether my three sons are right or not, but at least I'm sure that it's their own choice. He took a deep breath. My children have all grown up. It's enough for me that they can walk on the path that they believe is right. Compared to eldest brother who died of a cold, third brother's name will be remembered by the army forever. What do I have to be sad about? Lightning could not help but recall the words of the other party that night. They used to live like mice, both thin and cowardly, but since joining the army, it is as if they have changed inside and outside. This is also the reason why I am full of confidence in the First Army. A team composed of such people will not be easily defeated. So that's how it is. By the way, I still have to thank you. Thank me? Lightning was stunned. Of course, the old man smiled. Without your timely notification, the camp would have suffered greater losses. In a way, you also protected the First Army and my other son. I was wondering when I would meet you again. Maybe I would never see you again. I didn't expect you to appear right behind me. It's great to be able to thank me in person. After drinking the tea, Lightning waved goodbye to Wuxia. She flew out of the carriage and saw the old man return to the control panel through the window. He grabbed the ID card and covered his face with his hands. Back in the residential area, Maggie was hovering in the air. As soon as she saw Lightning, she pounced on her. Where have you been, Ku? Why did you come back so late, Ku? Have you forgotten what's going to happen today? Oh, what is it? Today is the day that Lorger is discharged from the hospital. Maggie folded her wings and landed on her head. Go to the medical center, Ku. Ah, okay, I got it. Don't move around. Lightning held the pigeon and flew to the center of the camp. After the last night attack, the layout of Tower Station Number 1 had changed a lot. Looking down from the sky, except for the platform, the yard and the sentry tower, the rest of the area was flat. Functional buildings such as the barracks and the medical center had all sunk into the ground. The firepower could cover both the outer circle of the defensive line and the inner circle. Even if the demons used the same trick again, they would not be able to cause as much damage as last time. Before long, they saw the familiar figure of the wolf girl. Hey, Lorgar flicked her ears. Long time no see. It's only been a week. Lightning heaved a sigh of relief when she saw how energetic the other party was. After all, according to Maggie's description of the wolf girl's condition when she was carried into the medical center, she looked as if she was about to die. Maybe it's because I've been sleeping every day. It feels longer. Lorgar stretched herself. Nana is so stubborn. She had to wait for a week to recover. I think the wound will heal by itself in a week. Since witches were much more resistant to the sleeping fern side effects than ordinary people, the sleeping treatment was usually effective in saving the magic power of the healer, as long as it was not life-threatening. This was also the experience accumulated by the Union during the war. You're indeed a monster. You're almost as good as Lady Ashes, Ku, Maggie said while flapping her wings. After talking to Miss Andrea, I don't think it's a compliment, Lorgar muttered. Ku, no nothing. She walked to Lightning, put her arms around the little girls and lifted her up. Hey, what are you doing? Put me down. Lightning said shyly. Someone's watching. I heard from Sylvie about everything you've done. So it's still possible to work hard. Lorgar held Lightning in her arms. That's the leader I know. Lightning stopped struggling. She felt a warm feeling in her heart. After a moment of silence, she said in a low voice, but I'm still a coward. The fact that you can say this to me means that you've taken that step. Lorgar put Lightning down. You're not thinking of leaving alone now, are you? Lightning looked at the wolf girl, and then at Maggie. She nodded gently. Yes. The moment she agreed, she felt as if something was pressing on her shoulders. But she did not reject this feeling. Instead, she felt inexplicably at ease. Ku. Maggie tilted her head. What are you talking about, Ku? We're talking about celebrating. Lorgar straightened up. Since I'm safe and sound, shouldn't we have a drink? Celebrate, Ku. Let's celebrate, Ku. Maggie echoed excitedly. Hey, wait a minute. Lightning said. I have to patrol at night. Chapter 1103. The day after the funeral, a piece of news from Neverwinter stirred up the whole engineering team. His Majesty had prepared a visiting party for them. All the workers who had completed the 3-month working period would get a paid day off, and their long-lost families would arrive at the terminus of the misty forest from Neverwinter and spend the precious day together. Everyone was grateful for such a considerate decree. As soon as the news arrived, cheers of "Long live the King" could be heard everywhere. And they worked even harder. Snaketooth was one of them. In fact, when the foreman found him and looked at the contact list, he could not believe his eyes. At the end of his row on the list, the name White Paper almost caused his mind to go blank. Hey, do you agree to this arrangement or not? Snaketooth clearly remembered the foreman's slightly impatient urging, or rather, the foreman had recorded every detail from seeing the list to signing the name. Every time he recalled the past, he could not help but grin. Let me make this clear. If you have any objections, you can fill in another name. The administrative office will ask again. But if you're rejected, your holiday will be cancelled. For the sake of saving time, the foreman naturally hoped that the list could be approved in one go. But Snaketooth knew that the man did not understand his feelings at that time. He wanted to hug the administrative office official who had compiled the list and give him a kiss, let alone raise an objection. I agree, 100% agree. What? If you agree, you should have said so earlier. Don't just stand there like an idiot. The foreman rolled his eyes at him and went to find the next person after Snaketooth signed the name. Snaketooth stayed where he was and stared blankly at the hand holding the pen for a long time. Until now he still had the thought, if this is a dream, I might as well never wake up. Unlike when he saw Paper in Neverwinter by chance, he did not dare to greet her because he was afraid of being rejected. Now, Paper was a member of the Witch Union, and her clothes and complexion were not the same as the skinny girl from before. If Paper did not want to have anything to do with rats, his presence would only cause her more trouble. However, the fact that Paper's name was on the list meant that the administrative office had asked for her opinion beforehand, and she had agreed to the visit. What he was most worried about did not happen, and he even got a chance to be alone with her. For Snaketooth, nothing could be more pleasant than this. In the next few days he was in a state of eagerness and excitement. Due to the large number of visitors and the limited capacity of the train, excluding the goods, it could only transport about 100 people at a time. Therefore, even though he was on the first list of visitors, by the time the day arrived, it was already a week later. "Kid, it's your turn today? She's dressed so cleanly." "Is she a girl? Don't forget the time tonight." Snaketooth ran out of the door, blushing under the teasing of his roommates. Only when he boarded the train with the nameplate did he heave a sigh of relief. No matter what, there were only 2 hours left before he could see Paper. Someone in the carriage kept reading out the precautions for visiting, such as not leaving the security perimeter of the forest terminus without permission, meeting after 8 o'clock at the latest, and not exceeding the prescribed time. In case of an emergency, they should immediately act according to the instructions of the First Army, and so on. However, Snaketooth had heard it many times from people who had been here before, so he was very familiar with it. With a long whistle, the train finally slowly stopped at the platform of the last station in the misty forest. "Get off the train and line up. Don't push," the station staff shouted. "This isn't grocery shopping. You'll get your share." The crowd burst into laughter. Snaketooth felt his heart pounding. The more he tried to restrain himself, the stronger it would be. He had imagined countless scenes of their meeting and rehearsed them over and over again, but when it really came to this moment, he still felt his mouth go dry and he was as clumsy as a fat pigeon. However, when the pretty figure appeared in front of him, Snaketooth found that everything he had imagined disappeared without a trace. He could only smile foolishly and could not say a word. "It turns out that you live in Neverwinter. That's great." The girl trotted over with a smile and grabbed his hand. Without hesitation or dislike, the estrangement of 2 years melted with this smile. Everything was just like the past. At that moment, Snaketooth felt that coming to Neverwinter was the right choice. "So you came here soon after you reclaimed the Longsong area?" The two of them walked side by side on the forest path. Unlike the noisy center of the camp, this place was much quieter and had a more solitary atmosphere. She, who had not seen him for a long time, seemed to have a lot of things to say to him, as if she wanted to fill in the blank space she had missed. Snaketooth answered all her questions. Compared with the former boss and follower, they were now more like a pair of partners. Yes, the rats were completely eradicated and there were many job openings posted on the square. If we continue to do what we did before, we'll be finished sooner or later. Snaketooth nodded. Tigerclaw and I discussed it and came to Neverwinter. It's the same job, but the salary here is higher, and I can be closer to you. However, these words just flashed across his mind, and he did not say them out loud. "No wonder I couldn't find you. You're not in that place anymore," Paper said with emotion. "Did you go to the Longsong area?" "I asked someone to go there," the girl said slowly. "When I learned that the entire Dark Corner Alley had been demolished, I thought you had already left the western region." "So, that's what happened. But since you came to Neverwinter, why didn't you look for me?" Paper asked. "Well, it's a long story." Snaketooth coughed. "At that time, Tigerclaw and I had nothing. In order to have a permanent residence, we were busy from morning to night, so we forgot about it." Even he himself felt this excuse was clumsy. If he had forgotten about it for 2 years, what was the difference between that and not remembering at all? However, he could never say such shameful things as being too embarrassed to greet her, and deliberately avoiding her when he saw her. Fortunately, Paper did not pursue the matter further. "Me too. When I first came to Neverwinter, I was also very busy. I helped the construction team speed up the solidification of cement, assisted Lady Agatha, and helped the chemical plant make all kinds of strange things." She counted on her fingers and said, "His Majesty said that my ability can speed up the reaction process and increase the energy level of the chemical bond. I'm very curious about how he knew that. According to the book, those particles are much smaller than sesame seeds. Can you imagine it? If you look at an atom as big as an opera house, its core is less than the size of a walnut." Hearing these words that he could not understand, Snaketooth could only nod in agreement. For a moment he did feel the change in paper and the difference between them. But more than that, his gaze lingered on the other party's every frown and every smile. Those sparkling eyes, those slightly raised eyelashes, the thin tip of her nose, the opening and closing of her lips. Everything was so captivating. He felt an impulse in his heart ready to burst forth. By the way, Paper changed the topic after telling him about her experience. After knowing that you were in Neverwinter, I asked Miss Scroll to check the files and found that Sunflower and the others were also here. That's great. We can get together often in the future. Snaketooth did not hear the latter part of Paper's words. At this moment, his mind was completely occupied by one thought. So he said it out loud. I like you, Paper. After blurting it out, he realized what he had done. An indescribable sense of nervousness immediately wrapped around his body, and his entire heart was in his throat. For a moment, Snaketooth even regretted his impulse. But to his surprise, he soon got a response. Chapter 1104. Did she really say that at that time? After listening to Leaf's narration, Vendi burst into laughter. What about Snaketooth? Didn't he say anything else? He just giggled with her. Leaf shook her head. Maybe it wasn't easy to muster up the courage to say those words. He probably used up all his courage after just one time. I think so. Vendi's smile widened. It's so good to be young. Is it good for us to do this? To eavesdrop on our conversation. Leaf's green phantom descended from the branches and condensed into her true form. I'm not eavesdropping. I'm just fulfilling His Majesty's request. Vendi said righteously. He asked me to pay attention to their actions. Since I want to pay attention to them, talking is part of it, isn't it? In that case, there was indeed no problem. Besides, if I didn't ask you to, you wouldn't have eavesdropped on their conversation, right? Wendy looked at Leaf with a smile. The latter cleared her throat and raised the corner of her mouth. Yes. The two looked at each other and burst into laughter. Leaf waved her hand. A huge vine rose from the ground and slowly lifted herself and Vendi to the top of the tree. Then the dense branches spread, crisscrossed, and reunited to form a veranda made of green leaves. Looking from this angle, the world suddenly became a lot brighter. The dense forest that extended all the way to Dragon's Pine Ridge was like a sea of emerald trees, and on the other side was a vast grassland. When she was still in the Witch Cooperation Association, Leaf would occasionally build similar treehouses for her sisters to avoid the heavy rain and the muddy and wet ground. However, it usually took more than half a day to build a resting place. In order to save as much magic power as possible, the treehouse was basically like a cicada cocoon. Even so, not everyone had a place to stay. But now not only did the veranda look like a model, but also a lounge chair and a tea table were built. There were even 2 broad-leaf cups on the coffee table, and the light golden flower nectar in the cups sparkled under the sunlight. Did you brew this yourself? Vendi picked up the teacup and gently sniffed it. An elegant fragrance wafted into her nose. Yes, I used morning dew, honey, and sugarcane wine. I also added some half-open jasmine buds. Leaf nodded. Although it's not as good as chaos drinks, you can drink as much as you want. You're getting stronger and stronger, Vendi exclaimed. Although they all say that Her Highness Anna is a once-in-a-century genius, I don't think you're any worse than her. As long as you have enough time, you might be able to control all the forests in the world and spread your consciousness to every corner of the continent. At my current speed, I definitely can't do that. Leaf smiled and waved her hand. It will take nearly 10 years just to integrate this misty forest. By the time I can leave here, I'll probably be old. That's not necessarily true. Vendi sipped the tea in the cup. Agatha said that the influence between witches and magic power is mutual. The more powerful a witch was, the stronger her body and the longer her lifespan would be. If it weren't for the cruelty of the war, those transcendents might still be alive now. She looked up at the sky. And your magic power is even higher than theirs. That is to say, you may be the one who can live the longest among us. Leaf did not answer. Instead, she showed a trace of loneliness, but Vendi did not notice. By the way, it's not just these 2 points. Even your appearance is related to your magic power level. She paused for a moment. The legendary Queen of Fallen Star, Alice, is devastatingly beautiful. Even Pasha and the others have admitted it. Vendi withdrew her gaze and carefully looked at her for a moment. Well, I do feel that you've become a little different from before. How should I say it? The moment you descended from the shade of the tree, you looked like a forest fairy. It's really enviable. Leaf helplessly rolled her eyes at her. This doesn't sound like something the gentle and caring Vendi would say. Who knows? Maybe I didn't have the mood to think about such a problem before? Vendi laughed. Apart from gritting your teeth and surviving, what magic power can achieve, what it will become in the future, whether it's ugly or beautiful, are just superfluous things. That's true. Leaf curled her lips. Now you're starting to think about the influence of magic power on your appearance. Is it possible that you also have someone in your heart? That's 2 different things. Besides, you're not much younger than me. Aren't you afraid of following in my footsteps? Let's not talk about not much younger for now. I already have a forest, so what's there to be dissatisfied about? But even if you don't tell me, I have a way to find out. After all, I'm the one who provided honey with the animal messengers. Unfortunately, as the person in charge of the witch union, every report of hers has to be read by me first. The 2 teased each other and enjoyed the afternoon's harmonious conversation. It was not until the sun gradually set that Leaf returned to the topic at hand. So are you leaving soon? Yes. Vendi stood up. I have to send Her Highness Anna and the others back. Seagull can't fly at night, so it has to take off before 4 o'clock. It seems that Paper can't spend the campfire party with her friends. Unlike other family members who took the train to visit, the little girl was directly transported to the front by glider. The scheduled return flight could not be delayed for a day because of her, nor could they leave her alone. There's no other way. Vendi spread out her hands. Whether it's for the sake of safety or the needs of Neverwinter, she can't spend too much time on the road. Let me help you call her. Leaf transformed back into her spirit form. Thank you. Leaf went into the trunk and appeared in front of Vendi after a few seconds. All right, she'll meet you at the landing field. She should be saying goodbye to her friends now. I'll send you there. Vendi nodded and turned around to wait for the balcony to descend. Well, Leaf suddenly said softly. What's wrong? No. She hesitated. Nothing, Vendi exhaled, turned around and said softly. Don't keep your thoughts to yourself. I'm always willing to listen. I'm just a little. A little what? A little. Leaf clenched her fists and was about to say something when she suddenly froze. She looked over Vendi's head and fixed her eyes on the north of the forest. Sensing the shock and surprise in her eyes, Vendi could not help but look in the same direction. She saw several wisps of black smoke rising from the dense forest like a slowly unfolding curtain. Chapter 1105. It was between spring and summer, when the soil was fertile. How could there be a fire in the forest? And it seemed that there was more than one fire. Leaf! Vendi shouted. I don't know. Leaf suddenly came to her senses. That place is beyond my fusion range. I can't sense the specific situation in the black smoke. If there's a fire, we have to stop it from spreading. I know. Leaf's expression was a little strange, as if she had mixed feelings. She bit her lip and nodded. Anyway, you go and meet with the others first. When the emergency plan is activated, the camp may be in chaos, and it won't be easy to leave by then. Now there were not only workers on vacation in the terminal, but also a large group of family members who had never been to the battlefield. It would not be easy to evacuate them in an orderly manner. Vendi soon realized this. Will you be okay by yourself? Don't worry. I know how to deal with it. Leaf said as she descended from the balcony. She glanced at Vendi for the last time, and then jumped into the dense forest. A moment later, a shrill alarm rang over the misty forest. Yes, I got it. In the general staff of Tower Station Number 2, Phil and Schilt put down the phone and turned to report to Edith. Madam, there's an accident on the Western Front. What did you say? There's a fire in the northern part of the forest? The Pearl of the Northern Region frowned. Did Miss Leaf see it? Yes. The evacuation plan has been activated. The soldiers of the First Army have entered a state of Level 2 alert. Inform the Commander-in-Chief and all the relevant senior officials. Edith thought for a moment and said decisively, tell them the General Staff needs to hold a pre-war meeting. Pre-war meeting. Philin repeated. Do you think it's? Yes, Edith said seriously. I suspect the fire is a new trick of the demons. In less than a quarter of an hour, the generals of the First Army and the representatives of the Witch Union gathered in the underground conference room. After the Pearl of the Northern Region explained the general situation, she told everyone the latest news she had received. The sentinel at the forest terminus has confirmed that the cause of the smoke is indeed a fire. Affected by the wind, the fire is quickly spreading toward the terminus. Only a forest fire, no traces of demons. Iron Axe asked in a deep voice. We haven't received any reports yet. Philin shook his head. The smoke is blocking our vision. No one knows what's going on behind the line of fire. Miss Sylvie, can you see anything? The concealing forest is too far from here, Sylvie replied. Unless I go there myself. Damn it. At this time, Iron Axe glanced at the map. Where is Her Highness now? According to the original plan, Princess Anna and some witches would rendezvous with the flying team at the terminal of the forest, and then take the Seagull back to Neverwinter. He should be on the returning Dark River one. After receiving the news of the fire, Miss Kant asked me to use the sigil of listening to inform them to change their itinerary. Good job. Iron Axe said with a sigh of relief. So only Her Highness and her party are left there? After getting a positive answer, he said to the Light of Dawn, tell them to take off immediately. Don't wait any longer. Yes. After dealing with the evacuation, Iron Axe looked at the staff of the General Staff. Now tell me your opinion. Leaf stood at the top of a giant fir tree, looking at the rolling smoke in the distance. In just over an hour, the fire had expanded a lot. Now not only was the smoke flying all over the sky pressing down on her, but she could also faintly see the flashing red light under the smoke. She seemed to hear the cries of the burning trees. Although it was not within her control, the heart of the forest was still trembling slightly, because it was also resonating in her heart. When facing Vendi, the word that she did not say was fear. After more than a year of annexing and merging, Leaf had gradually touched the essence of her ability. In a sense, it could indeed make her an immortal existence. All the plants incorporated into the heart of the forest would become a part of her. In other words, as long as the area of integration was larger, she would be more difficult to eradicate. After all, it was easy to clear a lawn, but it would be much more difficult to flatten a forest or an entire grassland. As for making the world barren, it was almost impossible. She remembered His Majesty once said that plants were the foundation of the natural world. Even if the whole world was destroyed, the earth was dug 3 feet deep, and the sky and earth were turned upside down. The first to appear on the surface would still be this group of tenacious creatures. But the problem was that at that time, she could no longer be regarded as herself. The clear spring flowing underground, the crawling insects in the soil, the trembling beehives on the trunks, the singing birds on the branches. These huge information constantly came from every corner of the forest, and were engraved in her memory. If she suddenly accepted them, she would immediately lose her mind, which was why Leaf had to slow down the speed of integration. However, she found that even so, it was impossible for her to record so much information by herself. The reason why she had not become a lunatic was that the heart of the forest had made a choice for her. Countless intertwined roots and vines formed a huge consciousness, and magic power and memory were integrated into one, flowing in the forest. This meant that once the integrated forest was destroyed, she might lose part of her memory. Even if new seedlings grew out of the ruins, what she had lost would not come back. It might be her acquaintance with Vendi and Scroll. It might be her escape from the Witch Cooperation Association with Nightingale, Mystery Moon and Lily. It might be the tender scene when she met His Majesty. It might also be her life in Neverwinter. She did not want to forget even Kara's stubbornness and prejudice, and the persecution and pursuit of the church, because these were her unique experiences, and the proof of her existence in the world. She was afraid of losing them. At the thought that this fire might appear in the integrated misty forest, Leaf felt an indescribable pain in her heart. But she could not retreat, because all of this was to defeat the demons and win the battle of divine will. She could not selfishly abandon her sisters for her own sake. They were also contributing their strength, and she could not let them down. Thinking of this, Leaf took a deep breath, raised her hands, and looked up at the sky full of afterglow. In an instant, a dazzling green light bloomed from her chest. Please listen to my call and take action. At that moment, the whole forest was like an awakened giant, slowly raising its body. Countless trees bent backward and fell at the same time. Even the turf and soil were curled up like a carpet. It was hard to describe the momentum of the scene as an earthquake. Chapter 1106. Based on the current information, the General Staff's conclusion is roughly like this. Edith knocked on the table and said, "This arson is likely to be a diversion." A diversion? Iron Axe said in a low voice. You mean the enemy's goal isn't to cut off our supply line? The demons want to, but they can't do it. Edith pointed at the map and said, the distance from the Tequila ruins to the north of the terminus station in the forest is longer than the railway on the plain. It's more than 500 kilometers. How much red mist do they need to carry to reach the arson area and set up an ambush? I think our Tequila colleagues should know this very well. If they don't set up a bloodline and don't have an outpost, the army can't support such a long battle line. Phyllis, the representative of Tequila, paused for a moment and said, based on past experience, 500 soldiers is the demon's limit. The terminus station in the forest is a well-fortified station, which is like a small stronghold, Edith continued. His Majesty has made a plan a long time ago. Once the demons set fire to the forest, Miss Leaf will create a safe isolation belt to keep the fire out of the station. This isolation belt is also a natural shooting range without any shelter or cover. If the demons want to break through the firing net of several blockhouses, 500 soldiers will be as good as dead. Let's take a step back and say they really have a way to send their army into the misty forest without any supply line. Arson is a way to expose themselves. The Light of Dawn added, it might be better to launch a direct attack at night. After all, the forest itself is a kind of cover. Before entering the territory controlled by Lady Leaf, the demons can easily hide their movements. That makes sense. Iron Axe nodded and said, but Sylvie, Lightning, and Maggie haven't found any traces of the demons. If they plan to attack Tower Station number 1 again, I'm afraid it's too late now. This is also a puzzle that we haven't solved yet. Maybe the enemy has thought of a new way to deceive the detection, or maybe they've used a new weapon that we've never seen before. Edith replied frankly, but the diversion strategy doesn't require us to attack the east and the west. You mean, Tower Station 0? Our current investigation focus is all in front of the railway, so we can't rule out this possibility. But the further the distance from the front line, the more troops the demons can send, Iron Axe said thoughtfully. That's right, Edith affirmed. I understand, the Commander-in-Chief said after a moment of silence. When Her Royal Highness returns safely, send the Black River number 1 to Tower Station 0, and number 2 to patrol between Station 0 and Station 1. The rest of the troops remained motionless and raised their alert level until the alarm was lifted. Besides, even if it's unlikely that the demons will attack from the north, it's better to put out the fire as soon as possible. He turned to look at Agatha. Can I ask you to do this? Don't worry, we'll do our best, the Ice Witch replied. Good. The investigation at the front line remains the same, and the main target is still the Tequila front line. Miss Sylvie. Leave it to me, Sylvie said with a nod. Iron Axe clapped his hands and said, judging from the current speed of the fire, it will probably reach the edge of the forest by evening. If the demons don't know that Miss Leaf can isolate the Sea of Fire on her own, they will bare their fangs when the sun sets. We still have about an hour. Let's get moving. Standing at the top of the watchtower, Sylvie felt a slight chill in the breeze that brushed her cheeks. The sun was setting, and the brilliant afterglow dyed half of the sky red. The vast grassland seemed to be dyed in 3 different colors. The furthest one was gold, shining as brightly as the sun, and the nearer one was red with a tinge of green. Against the blue sky, it looked like a sea of purple flowers. The grassland under her feet was covered in shadows, which were blue and black, which was the exclusive color of the night. Such a beautiful scene could only be seen in this boundless barbarian land. However, it was also a countdown to the coming war. Every time the sun set, the enemies were one step closer to them. Under such a background, even the most moving natural scenery lost some of its beauty and became austere and bleak. Sylvie turned her head and looked to the southwest. Although the misty forest was not within the observation range of the Eye of Magic, she still took some time to look at it. She could not tell why, but she felt a little worried. In retrospect, whether it was the judgment of the general staff or the order given by Iron Axe, there was nothing to nitpick about. Although it was not perfect, at least it was steady and prudent. Without the supply of red mist, the demons were like a nailed string. The longer the string was stretched, the weaker their strength would be. If the demons were really coming for the Forest Terminal and Tower Station 0, the garrison would be able to hold on until the reinforcements arrived. There was no doubt that the enemies would invest most of their strength in the front line of the railway. But why? Why can't I get rid of this worry? Sylvie shook her head and suppressed the distracting thoughts in her mind. When she was about to glance at the front line again, she suddenly saw a ball of light at the corner of her eye. Light? How? She widened her eyes in surprise and looked at the ball of light. It was bright red, like a dazzling flame. After jumping into her field of vision, it was moving quickly to the south. Strange, am I seeing things? The Eye of Magic should not be able to see that far. Yes, she could not see it. The darkness in her field of vision proved this. Beyond the range of the light, the Eye of Magic would lose its observation ability and shrink to an ordinary perspective. In the dim light, it was difficult to distinguish the boundary between the earth and the forest. It was basically pitch black. That was why the light was so eye-catching. Since it was not an illusion, what did she see? Sylvie suddenly felt a chill rising from the soles of her feet and up her spine, making her shiver uncontrollably. She knew what she was worried about. That was something that everyone had overlooked. What she saw was magic power, and it was an extremely powerful magic power. The observation range of the Eye of Magic was limited by its own limitations, and could not spread its magic power further. However, when there was a powerful magic power source, the magic power would be reflected on the Eye of Magic, and thus seen by her. It was like the sunlight shining through the closed eyelids. To be able to be directly sensed at this distance, the magic power of the intruder must have reached an astonishing level. The Cursed Demon. This was the only name left in Sylvie's mind. The humanoid alien from the Tequila Ruins, the commander of the demon army. As a general, he was always the core of the army. When 2 armies fought, the general was like a chess player, and the outcome of the game was determined by the outcome. It was rare for a general to be bare-chested. However, they had neglected the fact that the intruder was also a powerful senior demon with terrifying combat power. At this moment, the speed of the red dot was still increasing. It was almost 3 times faster than Maggie's Devil Beast's flying speed. From the beginning, the intruder was targeting Leaf. Chapter 1107. But at this distance, it was impossible to warn the enemy. The speed of the red dot increased by a few notches and became even more distinct. What should I do? Yes, the phone. I can use the phone to inform Leaf. Sylvie slid all the way from the top of the watchtower to the underground conference room, and shouted to the light of dawn. Call Leaf and tell her to leave immediately. Ferlin realized that something big must have happened. Without asking why, he picked up a phone and shook the handle with all his might. Leave. Where are you going? Anywhere is fine. Neverwinter, south of the forest. The farther away from the terminal, the better. At this time, all eyes in the conference room were focused on Sylvie. Did you find anything? Edith asked. We guess wrong. The enemy is aiming at Leaf, and there's only one of them. Sylvie looked to the southwest anxiously. Leaf needs to concentrate when she controls the forest, which is equivalent to an entity. As long as the enemy can see the flow of magic power, they'll be able to locate her. They set the forest on fire just for this moment. What? Edith suddenly frowned. Can you also observe the demon's actions from here? Because the enemy's magic power is too strong, she murmured. But Lady Leaf is also very strong, Philin interrupted. If she doesn't rely on fire, even an army of mad demons can't do anything to her in a short time, right? But since the enemy has done this, they can't be unprepared. Sylvie could not help but clench her fists. The red dot in her field of vision had begun to rise rapidly, and its trajectory was like a raised snake head. Is the phone still not connected? Yes. No one is answering. As expected, all of Leaf's attention is attracted by the fire. At this rate, the two will meet in 1 or 2 minutes at most. Call the terminal, Edith said. Ask the First Army stationed there to inform Leaf, and ask them to prepare for reinforcements. Yes. Philin turned around and picked up another phone. While waiting anxiously, Sylvie clearly saw that after the red light passed the apex, it fell straight down like an ominous meteor. Launching a frontal assault from the sky without any scruples, she had already vaguely guessed the worst answer in her heart. The enemy was probably the magic slayer. This should be enough. Leaf clapped her hands and let out a long sigh. The trees at the edge of the camp had been separated from the north side, so no matter how the fire burned, it would not threaten the safety of the terminus. However, when she saw the twisted and withered branches in the flames, she still felt a little uncomfortable. How many memories would she lose if she burned the forest under her control? How many of them were important and precious? Just thinking about it made him feel uncomfortable. Pull yourself together, Leaf. They still had to prepare to extinguish the fire. She silently encouraged herself, and was about to walk around the camp to see if there was anything she could do to help. Suddenly, a whistling sound came from above and attracted her attention. Leaf looked up. It was almost night and the sky was dark purple, so it was difficult to see what was making the sound. Be careful, quickly dodge, someone suddenly shouted. Before Leaf could see who it was, she subconsciously hid in the trees. At the same time, a black shadow fell from the sky and almost brushed past her face. The surrounding branches and leaves were instantly turned into powder. The moment the black shadow landed on the ground, there was no earth-shattering sound. It could even be said that it was silent. This strange scene made Leaf feel a strong sense of uneasiness. However, before she could do anything, a distorted ripple had already spread out with the black shadow as the center. The magic power that had been flowing smoothly suddenly froze. Then it broke into pieces like a mirror. Leaf only felt dizzy for a while, and then was forced out of the trunk by an irresistible force. After falling heavily on the ground, she could not help but taste something sweet in her throat. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. It was not until then that Leaf saw the true face of the shadow. It was a tall and straight demon with extremely sharp facial features. Except for its dark blue skin and weird clothes, it was almost no different from a human. Just by standing there, it gave people an indescribable pressure. It was as if the air had become sticky. Leaf panted and propped herself up. No matter how hard she called out to the forest, it did not respond to her. It was not the first time that she had been forcibly cut off from the heart of the forest. The magic slayer. Her heart sank. However, the other party did not sneer nor howl. He only stretched out his 5 claws that were as sharp as blades and pounced towards her. Leaf clenched her teeth and closed her eyes. However, she did not feel the pain she had expected. Ding! A strangely shaped big sword was placed horizontally in front of her, blocking the opponent's sharp claws. The blade was as thick as a door, and the golden sun symbol on the blade was something that would never be forgotten once one saw it. Emissary Ashes. Your opponent is here, monster. Ashes blocked the magic slayer's claws and stood in front of Leaf. Ashes? Leaf's eyes widened in surprise. Didn't you return to Neverwinter with Princess Tilly? I saw the seagull with my own eyes. Yes, it should have been like that, Ashes said without turning her head. But I felt that the fire was a little strange, so I volunteered to stay. After all, if something goes wrong, I can also help, can't I? So that's why. She was the one who gave the warning. So this is the magic slayer you met before? Yes, but you have to be careful. It's much stronger than the senior demon you met before. I can see that. Ashes held the big sword in front of her chest. Don't worry. I may not win, but I'll be fine as long as I can hold on until the reinforcements arrive. The demon looked in the direction of the campsite, and then at the two coldly. Extraordinary. Although the demon's pronunciation was not fluent, it was undoubtedly a language that humans could understand. This was even more incredible than the magic slayer himself. In the long history of the Battle of Divine Will, no demon had ever communicated with a witch. You can speak our language? Leaf could not help but ask. Learning is the foundation of evolution. Only you will be surprised by this. The senior demon spread its arms. Countless things can change in hundreds of years, but you still act as if it was yesterday. Demons extraordinary, and the titles haven't changed at all. It's pathetic. What did you say? Ashes shouted in a low voice. A gust of wind answered her. Chapter 1108. Suddenly, Leaf let out a cry of surprise. Ashes turned her head, and found that the gust of wind that had swept over her body had not disappeared. Although it had weakened a lot, it still blew the leaves up. At the same time, the magic slayer appeared behind her. How? How is this possible? That cyclone is clearly a kind of ability. Why didn't the god stone of retaliation completely seal its effect? Without much time to think, Ashes drew back her sword and slashed at the magic slayer's neck. However, the magic slayer blocked the attack with only one hand. As the two collided, she clearly saw the blue ripples on the demon's arm. The magic slayer did not even look at her. Instead, he raised the gale again and blew Leaf further away. This guy only wants to kill Leaf. Ashes followed closely behind the magic slayer, but the distance between them was gradually widening. Leaf tried to fight back, but the magic slayer simply waved his hand and all her efforts were in vain. This level gap could not be overcome with willpower. The flow of magic power in the space was disrupted, and it was difficult for her to gather her strength. Is this the senior demon's control of magic power? Whether it was interrupting Leaf's ability or taking the time to knock her back, it seemed to be doing it with ease. Ash's palms were sweating. If this went on, she would not be able to catch up with the opponent's fatal blow that could come at any time. At this critical moment, Ashes was more focused than ever. Faster, faster. For the past 2 years, she had been following the tequila's extraordinary training method, and had been wearing weights most of the time. After taking them off, she could feel the changes in her body. The magic power attached to her muscles and bones grew stronger and stronger, constantly nourishing every corner of her body. She even had the illusion that the magic power was gradually replacing her flesh and blood. But this was not enough. She had to move faster to save Leaf, and to protect the people she wanted to protect. Driven by her consciousness, the magic power began to gather in her legs. During the holy duel with Lorgar, Ashes saw a strange fighting technique. When the magic power was focused on a certain part of the body, it could greatly increase the explosive power and endurance. This was also the reason why the wolf girl could change her limbs. The magic slayer did not focus on her, so she could focus on sensing the flow of magic power in her body. The fragmented surroundings made the feeling even clearer. When the demon used the same trick for the 4th time and pulled the distance between them to 20 meters, it directly broke through Leaf's vine defense and reached out its sharp claws to stab her chest. This attack seemed to be irreversible. Almost at the same time, Ashes used all her strength to kick the tree. In that instant, she felt that she had vaguely grasped something. Her body seemed to have turned into a bolt of lightning, covering the distance of more than 20 meters in the blink of an eye. It was as if time had stopped. Even without using her eyes, she could clearly see the scene of the tree being smashed to pieces, the wind brought up by the magic slayer's sprint, and the scene of weeds being crushed. For the first time, the magic slayer stopped and raised his hands to block her attack. Bang bang. With all her strength, the magic slayer was sent flying a few meters away. He tumbled twice in the air and landed steadily on the ground. Ashes did not stop. She caught the falling leaf and once again shielded her behind her. Oh. The demon raised his eyebrows and showed a trace of interest. Open fire. At this moment, the reinforcements that Ashes had been waiting for finally arrived. The team of God's punishment witches stationed at the terminus of the forest jumped out of the dense forest and pulled the trigger of their shotguns at the only enemy in the forest. A deafening roar resounded through the forest. Bullets sprayed at the target like raindrops. The magic slayer used the tree trunks as cover and dodged to the left and right like a ghost. Even so, amidst the flying tree bark and debris, blue light could be seen from time to time on its body. Further away, there was the sound of hurried and chaotic footsteps. Apparently, after the God's punishment witches arrived, the first army was gradually closing in on the demon. The demon took one last look at Ashes and leaped into the air. An amazing burst of magic power burst out from its body. It quickly rushed up and disappeared into the boundless night in a few seconds. Damn it! The leading God's punishment witch spat. She walked up to Ashes and squatted down. My name is Elena. Are you okay? I'm fine. Ashes glanced at the semi-conscious leaf in her arms and reached out to gently wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. But she needs treatment. Don't worry, Elena comforted her. I've been informed by the front line that Miss Nana and Miss Nightfall are on their way. As soon as the ascendant landed on the ground, a junior guard came forward to greet him. Lord Osrook, this is the breathing tank for you. Before he could finish, the man snatched the tank away and directly put it to his nose to take a deep breath. Hiss. After a long time, Osrook seemed to have recovered and said, replace it for me. Yes. After exhaling the waste tank, the guard inserted a new tank as long as an arm into his back. For the promoted, this breathing method did not rely on armor and would not hinder his movement, so it was an ideal way to carry him. What about your trip? A little bit, but it's within my expectations, Osrook said expressionlessly. After all, that's the humans' territory. If I couldn't even stop them, I would have to wonder if Caberdabi really betrayed us. No, they didn't stop the real you, the guard said loudly. The breathing tank limited your strength. If you were within the range of the birth tower, those bugs would be no match for you. Driving magic power would speed up the consumption of red mist, especially for the higher ascendants. Considering the amount of red mist needed to travel back and forth, it was like fighting with shackles on. So this is just a bait. Next time, I'll choose a fairer place. Osrook looked to the south of the forest and said, a cemetery suitable for eternal rest. If the Sky Lord could support you more, the guard said indignantly, you wouldn't have to take such a risk. The birth tower of Tequila is also. Risk? Osrook interrupted his subordinate. I think it's quite interesting. After all, it's better to experience it yourself than to listen to others' reports. It buckled a deformed steel ball from its armor and looked at it carefully for a moment. The females who are also awakened have not improved at all, but the males who have no magic power have changed. Those humans are not completely useless. It would be better if I could understand them more. The guard did not reply, but a look of indignation appeared on his face. Osrook put the steel ball into his arms disapprovingly. As for the Lord, I believe he must have tried his best. But the Lord must have his own concerns and difficulties, so there's nothing to be indignant about. After all, we're all fighting to reach a higher realm and reach the sky, aren't we? You are right. The guard lowered his head. Take the tombstone and retreat. There's still a long way to go back to Tequila. Osrook slowly flew up and turned to the direction of the holy city. Now that the bait has been laid, all we need to do is wait. Wait for the day when it tightens. Chapter 1109. 2 days later. Grey Castle, City of Neverwinter. That's pretty much what happened at that time. Ashes recounted the details of the battle. After the fire was extinguished, Lightning searched about 100 kilometers to the north and found some traces left by the enemy. According to the scene analysis, the traces were left by the spider demons when they passed through the forest. There weren't many of them, about 3 or 4. Due to the interruption of communication in the forest, Roland did not know that Leaf had been attacked until the next evening. The next morning, he immediately asked Tilly and Vindy to drive the Seagull to the terminal station and bring Leaf back to Neverwinter. Ashes was fine and seemed to be unscathed, but Leaves was carried off the plane. The silver lining was that Nightfall had planted the seed of symbiosis in her body. Even though Leaf was unconscious, the symbiosis did not seem to be in much pain. This meant that Leaf's mental exhaustion was far greater than her physical injuries. Roland suppressed his distracting thoughts and looked at the big map on his desk. He had a clear picture of the whole attack in his mind. The demon commander had indeed noticed the abnormality of the misty forest. After all, the railway line had taken a turn here and extended all the way to the Tequila ruins. However, it did not choose to attack the trenches and barbed wire fences at the terminal station. Instead, it directly targeted the witches. A small group of people traveled nearly 500 kilometers from the ruins of the Tequila ruins to the northern end of the forest. Such a long march was destined to be impossible for a large army to fight. Presumably, the spider demons were not only responsible for the arson mission, but also carrying a large number of red mist cans. In a sense, this was also a tactical operation by the enemy. Setting fire to the forest was just a pretense to attract the witches' attention. Now that he thought about it, whether or not there was an emergency strategy for the fire attack, the controller of the forest was very likely to stay in place and pay attention to the further development of the situation. This was the moment that the enemy seized. Perhaps in the eyes of the demons, it was Leaf who supported the logistics of the First Army. As long as they killed the forest controller, they would be able to resolve the crisis at the front lines and force the humans to retreat without a fight. Although there were some deviations in their intentions, the fact that they were able to come up with such a plan already showed the extent of the demons' understanding of magic. They accurately guessed the form of Leaf's ability and targeted her with a beheading attack. They relied on their individual strength to run a long distance, and calculated the time needed to advance and retreat. It could be said that every step was closely linked. If one did not have a deep understanding of the use of magic power, it would be impossible to achieve this. He even suspected that the demons had seen abilities similar to Leaf's. Although it would take the enemy team at least 1 week to return by the original route, and it was not difficult to catch up with the spider demons by following their distinct tracks, it was meaningless for them to do so. The Magic Slayer, who could fly independently, could abandon the team and escape at any time. If they sent too few people to chase after the spider demons, they would be easily bitten, and if they sent too many people, they would only be able to kill a few spider demons and some low-level demons. Similarly, the enemy did not have any good countermeasures against the secret movements of such an elite team. Most of the important witches were protected by God's punishment witches, but for Leaf, Maggie, and Lightning, who were erratic, it was impossible to arrange a perfect protection plan. Fortunately, there were not many senior demons who could do this. Moreover, when the Magic Slayer ran at full speed, there would be obvious signs of magic power. As long as the enemy prioritized retreat, it would not be easy for them to succeed. Another thing that caught Roland's attention was the conversation between the Magic Slayer and Ashes. Demons can speak human language? As a senior demon, Dabi, who had been captured alive, did not have this ability. Without Camilla's mind connection, he could not even communicate with Dabi. Learning is the foundation of evolution. Countless things can change in hundreds of years, but you still live as if it were yesterday. Rumor has it that before the first battle of Divine Will, someone had come into contact with the demons. It was a human who passed on his knowledge to them. The words Ashes repeated and the rumors Pasha mentioned alternated in Roland's mind. For some reason, Roland felt that the Magic Slayer was proud when he talked about the past hundreds of years, as if he had witnessed countless vicissitudes of life. Could it be that it was a devil from the Union era? Or even earlier? Is that why it learned the human language? But this was too inconceivable. Just as Roland was deep in thought, Vendi's voice suddenly came from outside the office. Your Majesty. She pushed the door open and said, Leaf is awake. I'm coming. Roland suddenly stood up and looked at Ashes. Do you want to go with me? The Transcendent nodded. By the way, Roland said as he walked past her, I forgot to thank you. Although Ashes looked unscathed, it did not mean that she was unscathed. Only when Roland got closer would he notice that there were several shallow wounds on her face and knuckles. The whirlwind that could blow Leaf away was not as gentle as a spring breeze. Normally, such small wounds would not stay on an extraordinary for more than a day, but they had not healed yet. In other words, once she made a mistake, she could suffer a fatal injury that could not be recovered. Obviously, the intensity of this battle was not as simple as she said. Ashes calmly accepted Roland's gratitude. She just slightly lowered her head and glanced at Roland with her golden eyes. Treat Tilly well. Of course, even if you didn't say it. Roland pursed his lips and understood what Pasha meant. This was the right thing to do, just like how she saved Leaf. It turned out that a straightforward extraordinary could also have such thoughts. He could not help but smile. Let's go. When Roland walked into Leaf's bedroom, the room was already full of people. Anna, Nightingale, Tilly, Scroll, Mystery Moon. Almost all the witches who joined the union in the first batch had gathered here. When they saw Roland, they all made way for him. In the crowd, he saw Leaf, who had already sat up. Her green hair was a little messy, and her face was a little pale, but she did not look too haggard. Her eyes were still bright. Your Majesty, Leaf said in a low voice, I've made you worry. It's good that you're fine. Roland breathed a sigh of relief. Her previous coma was indeed caused by mental exhaustion. But he also knew that it was a little forced to say, it's good that you're fine. Leaf had also suffered from a curse similar to Lightning's. She still had internal injuries caused by the forcible interruption of the Heart of Forest state. At most, it was not life-threatening. I've already heard about the specific situation from Ashes. You just have a good rest and don't worry about the forest for the time being. As for your injuries, I'll definitely find a way. She shook her head and said, No, Your Majesty, please let me go back to the front. Leaf. Nightingale could not help but cry out. I know what everyone is thinking, but me lying on the bed won't help the situation at all, right? Leaf spoke very slowly, but her tone was very clear. Whether in the misty forest or in Neverwinter, the curse won't disappear. In this case, there's no point in resting. But, Vendi murmured, as long as I stay in the forest for a day, the communication between the two places can be maintained, and the experimental fields won't be abandoned. I can also help transport the supplies needed by the front lines. This will more or less be of some help to the goal of defeating the demons. Comparing the two, it's clear which is the better choice, isn't it? She slightly panted and tried to smile. Don't worry. This time, if I see something wrong, I'll definitely retreat. Everyone was speechless for a moment. Roland took a deep breath. Well, he should have guessed it earlier. If Leaf had not been like this, how could she have walked all the way from the impassable mountain range to Border Town barefoot, and brought all her surviving sisters back here? She was just like the forest. Beneath her soft appearance, there was a tough heart. I see. After a moment of silence, Roland nodded and said, But you have to promise me that before the magic slayer with the power of the curse is killed, you can't act alone at any time. Then he looked at Ashes and said, Can you take care of her during this period? Chapter 11:10. Back at the Sleeping Spells residential area. Ashes heard Tilly coughing behind her as soon as she closed the door. Ahem. Do you understand what Roland meant by taking care of her? She could not help curling up the corner of her mouth and deliberately replied in a confused tone. Isn't it exactly what it means? Stay by Leaf's side, like taking care of a patient. She's injured, so it must be very inconvenient for her to. Hey. This time, Ashes couldn't help but smile, revealing the corners of her mouth. So you were lying to me. Don't worry, I know what I should do. She turned around and blinked. His Majesty just wanted to use the Extraordinaire's unique perception of magic fluctuations to warn Leaf in advance, just like how I met you. If not for this ability, you would not have seen me in the crowd with my hands covered in blood. I'm not a demon, Tilly said with her arms crossed. It's just an example. Ashes waved her hands in surrender. After all, I'm the only one who has fought with the Magic Slayer, right? What happens after the warning? Of course, we'll approach the reinforcements and work together to defeat the enemy. Really, I'm not Princess Tilly of the Wild Flame clan, who wants to challenge every opponent. Ashes smiled. As long as her magic is not blocked, Leaf can cross the entire forest in an instant. There's no point for me to stay here. Phew. Tilly exhaled. Don't forget what you said. Of course. She walked up to Princess Tilly and looked her in the eyes. I'll be with you for a long time. That girl was born into a noble family and doesn't know how to take care of people. She thinks she can fight. How can I trust her to take care of you? What are you talking about, silly? Tilly glared at her and walked back into the house grumpily. When she reached the door, she suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, I'm actually very happy that you can save Leaf. Ashes was slightly stunned. If you're only protecting me, it's a waste of your abilities. Tilly turned around and said, although you always say that it's the safest choice for me to go back to Sleeping Island, you actually like it here, don't you? Now you smile a lot more than before. Is that so? She couldn't help but touch her cheek. Even when we were on Sleeping Island, you rarely smiled. You always had a straight face, as if you were always waiting to fight with your enemy. Tilly continued. I'm afraid that even you didn't notice it, but the new witches are very afraid of you. Only an innocent girl like Maggie can mess with you. But now, not only do you get along well with the Witch Union, I heard that you have an admirer? You mean, Lorger? No, she's just more familiar with me. It's probably because we often spar. That's good, Tilly interrupted. Compared to the Avenger of the past, I prefer to see you now. But... She paused and said, this doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. Do you understand? After a short silence, Ashes replied, I understand. Very good. Tilly nodded with satisfaction. Maybe I can go to the battlefield with you soon. Oh, is there any progress on the Aerial Knight project? Roland said that he's trying to combine a new power source with the glider. If it's successful, we can build a new type of glider that can fly freely without Vendi. Tilly said excitedly. But the first thing to be completed is a special glider specially built for me. It's said that it can fly higher and faster than devil beasts. His Majesty won't let you go to the battlefield and... I've already made an agreement with him. Ashes smiled and didn't say this out loud. I'll go to see it on the day of the test flight. Okay. Then I'll take a shower first. My back is sticky after flying the Seagull for a whole day. See you later. You really don't want to shower together? Don't even think about it. Tilly said and slammed the door. Ashes sat down on the bench in the living room and looked at her palms. She could still remember the last strike she had slashed at the demon. At that time, she felt as if she had stepped into a new realm. Even if it was only for a second, it was enough to leave a deep impression. Whether it was vision, movement, or reaction, it was as if she had been separated from the surrounding world. Only magic power was left to accompany her. The overly strong torrent of magic burned her and gave her unparalleled strength. Ashes even felt that the power was responding to her call and tempting her to go further. Magic power not only affects our bodies, but also our temperament. If we desire to use magic power to achieve a certain goal, it will guide us in that direction. So, what are you fighting for? So, the words of the god's punishment which Phyllis during the first expedition to the wilderness rang in her ears. Why are you telling me this? Because you are an extraordinaire. You were born with unimaginable potential. However, in order to truly cross that hurdle, one must have a realistic goal and a firm will. According to the records of the Union, all the transcendents above the transcendent level were promoted in battle, and those who couldn't overcome this hurdle all died in the hands of the demons. I hope you can be the former. Transcendents. Did the three chiefs of the Union also face the same choice? Ashes clenched her fists. Right now, she probably already knew the answer. Roland returned to his office and picked up the call to the administrative office. Connect Barov. Yes, Your Majesty. Soon, the chief's voice was heard from the receiver. What are your orders, Your Majesty? When will the next primary education examination be held? Let me check. According to the plan, it will be in a week. The number of participants is estimated to be 2,650. It seemed that the timing was just right. Roland calculated in his mind. Make a manpower plan. I need to transfer a group of people to implement the new project. Tentatively about 500 people. Yes, Your Majesty. The current city of Neverwinter was like a huge melting pot that attracted people from all over the kingdom. After completing primary education, they were immediately assigned to various jobs. On the production line, a large number of experienced producers could easily accept these newcomers who had just entered the industry. After the small handicraft workshop model was broken, it became a process system instead of a private collection of knowledge. It became a matter of course for the old to teach the new. When a large number of newcomers became experienced workers, the production scale would be further expanded and more people would be recruited. The foundation that Neverwinter had accumulated over the years could automatically realize this cycle. When the number of people and resources in the melting pot reached a certain scale, the industrialization would be unparalleled. After hanging up the phone, Roland took out a thick stack of blueprints from the drawer. Since the night attack at Tower Station Number 1, he had prepared a lot of plans for the universal response, most of which were collected in the dream world. What he needed to do now was to localize them according to the actual situation in Neverwinter. Among the plans, there was a weapon that was very suitable for the current situation. You have a new idea? Nightingale appeared from the mist. Chapter 11:11. Well, it looks like a thick bamboo pole. Nightingale leaned over and asked, What's its name? RPG. Roland smiled and said, Ancestor. RPG. Nightingale repeated awkwardly. What a strange name. Is it someone's code name? Is it to commemorate the invention of this weapon? Roland shook his head with a smile. It has many names and forms in the dream world, but this is the most popular one. Due to its popularity, a group of believers also appeared, and it even gradually evolved into a religion, the Pan-RPG religion, like the legendary dual swords of salvation and devastation. Nightingale's interest was piqued. Is it really that powerful? The so-called dual swords of salvation and devastation was a sacred weapon described in an epic biography passed down by the ancient witches. Before the first battle of Divine Will, there had been a fanatical organization that wanted to find it. Although it was only a story, it was somewhat similar. You can think of it as a pan-RPG, Roland said. After all, the dual swords of salvation and devastation all belong to the category of RPG, and it undoubtedly contributed to world peace. But its ancestor is much weaker. But you can't directly jump to the level of RPG and pan-RPG, so you can only start from the ancestor of RPG and slowly improve it, right? Nightingale said with a look of sudden realization. Exactly. Roland was gratified. After so many years of being influenced by what he saw and heard, he finally found someone who could keep up with his pace. You're quite perceptive. Of course. Things are always progressive, aren't they? Nightingale said proudly, and threw a piece of dried fish into her mouth. Like the black ribbons and madam you sometimes mentioned. Aren't they the progressive forms of gliders and stone ships? I've learned a lot by following you for so long. Roland coughed and said, Forget about them. Whether it was the battle at the northbound slope or the night attack at Tower Number 1, they all had the same problem. Ordinary soldiers could not pose a threat to the senior demons. According to the Union's intelligence, the senior demons had more than one ability, and there was no obvious pattern to their abilities. However, it seemed that using magic to create a barrier to resist damage seemed to be their innate ability. Perhaps this was just a coincidence, or perhaps it was the best solution that the enemy had obtained after a long battle. Devils that didn't possess this ability would have long since been reduced to ashes. No matter what, it was never wrong to prepare for the worst. This barrier was similar to Shavi's ability, but it could only protect the surface of the body, and there was a limit to how much damage it could withstand. If it stood in place for a squad to hit multiple targets at the same time, it would probably only last for a few seconds. The problem was that the enemy was not a target. If an infantry squad of the First Army attacked the senior demon first, the senior demon would react after 1 or 2 shots. Then, the senior demon would either hide or wait for an opportunity to counterattack. Originally, the gods' punishment witches were responsible for suppressing the senior demons. They were born to suppress the senior demons. Not only were they as powerful as extraordinaries, but they could also block the enemy's ability. They could be said to be a tit-for-tat existence. However, the senior demons, who were supposed to be the commanders of the army, had appeared on the front line several times. According to this trend, the 300 gods' punishment witches were not enough. He needed a weapon that could effectively increase the firepower of individual soldiers. RPGs looked great, but rocket-propelled grenades made it impossible for Neverwinter to mass-produce this legendary weapon in a short time. Even the simplest rocket engine was a power system that included fuel and combustion chambers. It was not easy to make one. If Anna had to make and debug it, it would be a waste of its original purpose. Therefore, Roland decided to get rid of the rocket-propelled grenade and leave it with a grenade. It was the ancestor of RPGs, the recoilless grenade. The most famous representative weapon in history was the Iron Fist. Although many people collectively referred to this type of weapon as a rocket launcher, in fact, they were 2 different types of weapons. The biggest difference was that the rocket launcher fired a rocket, which had its own power source and could be launched normally without a barrel. For example, the famous 107 rocket launcher could be ignited by dry batteries with a good accuracy by piling a mound of soil on the ground. The Iron Fist and the RPG were recoilless cannons that needed a barrel to create a recoil force. If it was ignited on the ground, it would only spin on the spot, and would not fly away even if it was 1 meter away. Especially for the latter, the rocket at the tail of the warhead was mainly used to increase the range and accuracy, and the power it needed to shoot out was still provided by the propellant. Compared with the constantly evolving younger generations, the biggest advantage of the Iron Fist was its simplicity. The barrel was a straight cylinder, the warhead was made of thin iron sheets, and the propellant was black powder, which was very suitable for large-scale production. Of course, Roland did not intend to copy the Iron Fist, because its simplicity was also its biggest weakness. Short range, poor accuracy, and low power, which were all unbearable shortcomings. As a person who learned from history, he naturally knew that some extremely small changes could greatly improve the performance of the weapon. For example, if he installed a gourd-shaped Laval nozzle at the tail of the launcher, it could accelerate the ejected gas from subsonic to supersonic speed, thereby increasing the recoil force and the range of the warhead. If he added a grip, a sight, and a wooden sleeve to the barrel, it could effectively improve the shooting experience and shooting accuracy. He could also install a tail made of soft steel on the body, which would automatically open and rotate with the body to increase its stability. In addition, if he pressed the front part of the warhead into a hollow inverted cone, the explosive energy could be gathered forward, forming a condensed energy armor-piercing effect, which would greatly increase the destructive power of the magic barrier. These improvements were all within the limits of Neverwinter's industrial technology. Roland closed the drawing, stood up, and walked to the French window. Admittedly, even if the First Army was equipped with a large number of individual grenades, it would not be able to completely offset the advantage of the senior demons, but at least the ordinary soldiers had the ability to at least compete with the senior demons. No matter how mobile the senior demons were, the armor-piercing grenades shot from their blind spots were still fatal. As long as they hit the target, the outcome would be completely different. This also meant that with a little bit of training, any ordinary person could be equipped with the means to kill a senior demon. In addition, armored units such as the spider demons and the giant skeletons would not be so helpless against them. And the cost of the above was only a small cluster of gunpowder and half a steel ingot. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.